and planning amendment application. Yeah. The public hearing was advertised June 3rd and June 10th, 2021 in the calendar pursuant to the Local Government Act. The role of council is to hear representation from persons who wish to provide comments regarding the proposed amendments. Everyone who wishes to speak shall be given the opportunity to be heard. No one will be or should feel discouraged or prevented from making his or her views known. However, it is important that all who speak at this meeting restrict their remarks to matters contained in the proposed amendments, and it is my responsibility as chair of this meeting to ensure that all remarks are so restricted. The main function of council members, members of council, if they wish, may ask questions of you following your presentation. However, the main function of council this evening is to listen to the views of the public. It is not the function of council at the public hearing to debate the merits of the proposed application with individual citizens. No decision will be made at the public hearing, but the entire proceedings will be considered by the District of Lake Country Council at a subsequent meeting. Submissions regarding the proposed applications may be received prior to or at the hearing. No further information or representation can be received or considered by council after the public hearing is terminated. Please state your name clearly before you begin your comments, and I will ask who is presenting this? Planner?
I am this evening, Your Worship.
Right.
I'm just going to bring my presentation up on the screen.
Were my speakers muted?
Yeah.
You're going to do what?
Okay, so the applications at this public hearing are OCP 2020-001 and Z 2020-006 for the property at 5812 McCoubry Road. The existing OCP future land use designations for the property are rural residential, urban residential, and parkland and conservation. And the existing zoning is RR2, rural residential 2, and RU1, single family housing. And the subject is public hearing for OCP Amendment Bylaw 1146-2021 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw 1147-2021. These applications are to facilitate a future 3-lot subdivision. And I did want to let Mayor and Council know that we received one letter from the public, and that was forwarded earlier today. For some quick background, at the May 18th regular council meeting, council gave first and second readings to bylaws 1146 and 1147 and forwarded the applications to this public hearing. Council also made a resolution to secure the road dedication on Otley Road, trail dedication along the north property line, and a Section 219 no build, no disturb covenant for the parkland conservation designated area prior to adoption of zoning amendment bylaw 1147-2021. As a reminder, the subject property is located between Otley Road and McCoubry Road in the McCoubry Plateau area. And as you can see from this ortho photo, there is an existing house on the property, and the property is majority in a natural forested state. The property slopes downward from McCoubry Road towards Otley Road. This slide shows the existing OCP future land use designations map on the left-hand side and the existing zoning map on the right-hand side. And as previously mentioned, the property is designated rural residential, which you can see in brown on the west portion of the property. Parkland and conservation, which is shown in green, which bisects the urban residential future land use designation, which is shown in yellow. On the right-hand side, again, you can see the existing zoning map. It is zoned RR2 on the west portion of the property and RU1 on the east portion of the property. This site plan shows the proposed OCP amendment, and it also shows the proposed future subdivision plan. The purpose of the OCP amendment is to realign the parkland and conservation designated area north-south to provide a better alignment and also to allow for a contiguous urban residential designated area. Therefore, the owner is proposing to redesignate the red triangular portion shown on the site plan from urban residential to parkland and conservation, and to redesignate the green portion on the site plan from parkland and conservation to urban residential, which would result in this green area shown on this site plan being designated parkland and conservation. The owner is proposing to rezone this green portion from RU1 to P5 conservation area. And this is just a more appropriate zone for an area that's intended to be a conservation area and remain in its natural state. Additionally, because of the proposed road dedication from Otley Road, the two proposed RR2 lots, proposed lot A and proposed lot B on the site plan, will be slightly too small. So the owner is proposing to rezone a sliver of the property, which is 0.8 meters wide, shown in red on the site plan, from RU1 to RR2, again, to facilitate the proposed 3-lot subdivision. As a reminder, these are the 3 conditions of rezoning. Should council grant third reading of the zoning amendment bylaw, these items would be required to be secured prior to adoption. Road dedication of 10 meters from the existing center line of Otley Road, 6-meter wide trail dedication for a pedestrian trail running east-west along the north property line, and a section 219 no build, no disturb restrictive covenant for the area designated as parkland conservation to ensure it remains undisturbed and in its natural state. And I did want to remind Mayor and Council that this covenant area, the P5 zone, would still remain on private property. It would be part of the remainder lot 99, which you can see on this site plan. Okay. And then just to end, a few context photos. These 2 photos are showing the approximate location of the pedestrian trail. On the left-hand side, it's closer to Macroubry Road, flatter portion. On the right-hand side, this photo is showing how the trail does become a bit steeper as it heads towards Otley Road. On the left-hand side, this photo is showing, it's looking south, and it's showing the area where the urban residential designated area ends and the parkland and conservation area begins. And then to end, on the right-hand side here, it's closer to Otley Road, showing the approximate location of the future property line between proposed lot A and proposed lot B. And as you can see, it is a flat portion of the site, which does provide a suitable area for building sites. Thank you. That ends my presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Councilor Scarrow, you had a question for the planner?
Just one question, Tamara. The park dedication we're talking about, is that going to become our property, or is that just governed by covenant?
Thank you for your worship. This is not a parkland dedicated area. It is just a portion of the property that will be redesignated parkland and conservation in the OCP and will remain private property protected by the zoning P5 and a section 219 no build, no disturb covenant.
Further to that, then, will the public be able to access it freely?
Not at this time. It would remain on private property. However, the RU1 portion has future subdivision potential. So should council wish at that time, a trail could be negotiated through that portion of the site. That is something that staff did consider, but because of the steepness of the area, it was not, and the fact that it doesn't connect to anything at this point, it was not deemed appropriate at this time.
Thank you, Tamara.
Thank you. Councillor Reid?
And thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Tamara. I just wanted to reference Mark Cozen's letter that we'd received relating to this, where he asks that the planning incorporate provisions to retain the natural landscape and existing trees in Area A, particularly as a buffer along Otley Road. I just wanted to clarify that the Area A that he's referring to would be the same Area A in the advert that went out to the community, which is the same as the section 219. So if, as those areas are the same and that section includes the provision to no disturb, no build, then that would seem to meet the requirements that he's raised in his email. Or is he talking about another area A, like Lot A or something like that?
Go ahead, with your will, Matt.
Thank you through your worship. I'm not sure if Mr. Cousin is available this evening. He did seem to say that he might attend the public hearing. I did speak to him on the phone, and through my conversation with him, my understanding was that he meant his concern was adjacent to Otley Road, keeping a buffer so that I imagine that those properties are still looking at a forested area rather than housing. If Mr. Cousin is available this evening, I hope he will clarify.
And thank you for that. Is that something that we have a mechanism to preserve a buffer strip along those Lot A and Lot B where they abut Otley Road? Is that?
Yeah.
Is there a tool to do that?
It likely would be a restrictive covenant. This is not something that staff did consider. It isn't a natural environment development permit area or anything like that, but certainly it is something that could be secured through a restrictive covenant.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else from council? Anybody phoning in, or anybody in the audience that was to address this bylaw? Do come forward. The microphone is at the podium there. State your name. I think so.
Okay. My name is Robert Naden, and I'm the applicant, or one of the applicants with my wife. I can speak to the question of the buffer. On June the 4th, I had a site visit with the Fortis electrical design engineer, explaining to me what would be required to run hydro in two lots A and B. They're proposing to put a pole at the junction of Lot A and B and Otley. And that pole would have a single transformer that would serve both lots. That at least prevents having to run hydro through the full length of Lot A and B. However, to get to the joint between A and B would require the removal of 6 or 7 trees along Otley. I asked about underground, same problem, but being rural residential, overhead lines are the guideline. Then I contacted District Engineering on the Monday the 7th. I wasn't able to get through, left a phone message. I then confirmed with an email on the 10th to advise that the Fortis design people required the removal of half a dozen trees. I didn't get a response. Being very concerned about fire season, I don't want to be removing trees in warm or hot weather. I made a decision on Monday with the rain that we had 2 days of cooler, wet weather. I had my contractor come in and take down the trees. I knew a development permit wasn't required because there was no ground disturbance and no building, no construction taking place. there will be no further removal of trees. Any future placement of roads, etc., would be up to whoever we sell the lots to, and would be at the development or building permit stage at that time. I hope that clarifies what has been done and what will not be done. No further tree removal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions from council? Hearing none? Councillor Scarrow.
Thanks for coming. Appreciate your input. The trees are down right now. Are you gonna use that wood? Good.
Right now, it's sitting in piles on the ground. I've contacted one person who needs, that's better, who wants a firewood, but anyone who has a truck could drive by and fill up
Okay, thank you.
with
Thank
a
you, sir.
flashlight later tonight.
I'm sure it'll be gone by the time you get back.
That's how I pick my cherries.
Thank you. Any letters received? I can't remember what the planner said.
Yes, one.
And positive, negative? I don't remember seeing it. Did you read it?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I read a section out which had the one concern, but they did say that they're generally in agreement with it, with that one ask for the buffer.
Okay, thank you. And anybody else, anybody teleconferencing? Hearing none, then I'll ask a second time. And a third time, anybody wish to comment on this amendment? Hearing none, I'll terminate this public hearing. Thank you. Thank you for coming. And now we get on to the regular council meeting for Tuesday, June 15th at just after 7 p.m. We acknowledge that we are conducting our business today in the unceded territory of the 6 Okanagan people. As a council, we recognize the importance of doing our best to build respectful relationships that contribute to stewarding the land and waters in the community with integrity and consideration for future generations. So with that, I need an adoption of the agenda. Councillor Ireland and Councillor Scarrow, those in favor, opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Public hearing minutes of May 11th be adopted. Councillor Scarrow, Councillor Gambo, errors or omissions, none. Those in favor, opposed, motion carried. And regular council meeting minutes of June 1st. Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Koza, errors or omissions, none. Those in favor, opposed, motion carried. Thank you. The report from the mayor, you saw the highlights for the regional Okanagan board and water, Okanagan Basin Water Board. No announcement this evening. No delegations or petition. Bylaw for the official community plan amendment. Are you doing that planning? For the official community plan and zoning amendment 1147/2021 be read a third time?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do not have a presentation. This is the applications that you just saw at the public hearing.
Okay, that's the one. All right, Councillor Scarrow moved. Councillor Ireland second. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Yes?
I've just got to ask the question. Normally, we would have a report after this, and I'm just wondering why this is happening in
You
this
just
way.
got the report. That was for that, let's see, with Raina, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was trying to turn my
We
camera
don't
on.
usually do them the same meeting.
No, this is a new process that we're trying, and it's undertaken in many communities where, like similar to Kelowna, they have their public hearing, and then that same item is available for council's consideration that evening as soon as the public hearing has been held. So for this one, we thought we'd bring it forward to council to see council's appetite. If this one being not very contentious, if they had the information, then it's certainly available for council to consider for adoption on the same evening.
Fooled you, didn't we? I haven't, it fooled me because we haven't done it. I've done it at the regional board too, but I haven't done it here. I had, yeah. Planner?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to make one clarification. The applications are only for consideration of third reading because there are conditions prior to adoption. So the options this evening are regarding third reading only.
Yeah, thank you. That's the motion I got. Councilor Arlen and Councilor Scarrow. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Public comment. Anybody wish to address council? Do come forward. State your name.
My name is Dan Koziak.
Oh, sorry, I missed it.
Dan Koziak.
Dan, thank you.
Sorry, Todd, I know you wanted to see my smiling face, but didn't quite work out that way.
Yeah.
Like I said, my name is Dan Koziak. I'm the Director of Operations for Marine Management Services. We're a chain of boat dealerships that operate across Western Canada, and we're the new owner-operators of Oyama Yacht Club. Some of you might be familiar with it in Oyama, so to speak. We own and operate 5 boat dealerships right now. 3 in Alberta, 2 are in British Columbia here, and Oyama will be the 6th. We're a full-service dealership. We offer marine sales, service, boat accessories, storage, valet for all of our customers. And of course, we want to add Oyama Yacht Club as our 6th store. Currently in Kelowna, we have Atlantis Marine. Some of you may be familiar with Atlantis Marine. It's on Highway 97. But with the Highway Expansion Act, we lost a good section of our property. We collapsed quite a bit, lost a lot, which made it almost impossible to operate in such a small section of land. We were able to purchase another little small section, but for us to compete with a lot of the other dealerships, we have to be in the storage business, we have to offer valet, we have to offer full service. And that makes it really difficult in such a small property. Currently, we do have an application for a temporary use permit with Oyama Yacht Club. I believe it expires in September, which we put the application in such time, paid the fees, applied for the city license. So that is in process right now, but we do have a long-range plan for Oyama Yacht Club. Our plan is to move Atlantis Marine in Kelowna over into Oyama and make it into a full-service dealership. Marine sales, marine service, continue out with the boat valet, continue on with the storage, indoor storage, outdoor storage for all of our customers, all of your customers, so to speak, which has been quite profitable and quite busy for that store. But of course, we want to continue that process on with Atlantis Marine, and with your help and with your support, we will be able to, or you will allow us to move Atlantis Marine from Kelowna into Oyama. We also have plans to do some site improvements, such as planting trees, improving the overall area, clean up the property a bit, but that is our long-range plan. So with your support, we hope to achieve this.
Okay.
And that's about it.
Yeah.
If anyone has any
Any
questions, though,
Councilor Scarrow.
the boat guys are, yeah,
Hi, welcome to Lake Country.
thank you. Beautiful.
You do realize you're dealing with a building, the parts of it were built in the late 30s.
Correct, yes, you did.
You do realize that there's limited things you can do with that kind of construction.
Yeah, there will be challenges for sure. And of course, we've been working closely with the fire marshal and to try to improve such areas that might require, sprinkler systems and improvements and whatnot. We recognize there will be challenges for sure.
Okay, that's all I wanted to make you aware of.
Okay, okay.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I just have a question. I think Atlantis, if I've driven past it, it's got a very big storage building.
No.
Right? No?
No.
Okay,
It has on Highway 97 has a tent.
right.
Maybe is that what you're thinking?
I thought there was heated storage. It's not the case.
No,
No, okay,
No,
okay.
it's on Highway 97, is a tent. If you drive by, hard to miss it. It's a blue and white tent.
Okay,
And there was a cement plant directly behind it,
right,
which has a small building on there as well.
okay,
But the property is less than 2 acres, maybe 1.7. And Oyama, or sorry, we just call it Oyama, sorry.
Yeah.
It's almost 4 acres.
that was gonna be my question. How many,
Yeah.
what did you used to have before the highway borrowed it? And what, what have you got in Oyama? So,
Yeah, so right now, currently, we have about 1.7 acres.
right,
Now we almost have 4 acres.
and you used to have,
Before the Highway Expansion Act,
Yeah.
it was almost 2 acres.
okay, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Anybody else? No, hearing none. Thank you for coming in.
I appreciate the time. Thank you very much.
Look forward to a successful operation there. Good. Thank you. All right. Development variance permit.
Thank you.
Anna,
Let's
Anna,
begin.
Juniper Cove Road.
Great, thank you. This application is DVP 2021-005 for the property at 17914 Juniper Cove Road. The property is within the Rural Residential Future Land Use designation of the OCP and the RR3 and W1 zones. This development variance permit application is to vary dock shape to allow a reverse F-shaped dock, as well as to vary dock materials to allow steel piles. And I wanted to let Mayor and Council know that no letters from the public were received, and the applicant and property owner are available this evening should Council have any questions for them. As you can see, the property is located adjacent to Okanagan Lake in northern Lake Country. And this is the ortho photo showing that there is an existing dock, as well as docks in the area of various shapes. This is the proposed dock design. In gray is the existing dock, and in tan, it shows the proposed dock extension. The applicant is proposing to build an addition to the existing dock that will provide additional private moorage and create a more functional and safe dock design. The existing dock is 32 meters long and has 2 boat lifts. The proposed dock extension would extend a portion of the existing end deck and add an additional arm to create a reverse F-shaped dock. The new design would accommodate 2 boat lifts and 1 personal watercraft lift and would use steel piles. To support the application, the applicant submitted a foreshore development report completed by a qualified environmental professional. And this report notes the dock is located in a yellow color zone for kokanee shore spawning. However, the QEP states that it is not anticipated that the harmful alteration, disruption, or destruction of fish habitat would occur if that proposed moorage extension were to be constructed. Thank you. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Tamara. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. The steel piles are only going on the addition, is my understanding. It's not going to involve replacing the piles on the whole dock.
Correct.
And the additional lift is just for a personal watercraft because it already has 2 boat lifts, my understanding. And my final kind of question / supposition is, what was it going to be? It's blown out of my head now. I can't remember what it was. It'll come back to me. It's just completely gone. But what I appreciate about this proposal is that it is not adding to the length of the dock. It is still 32 meters long, which is below the bylaw. The addition of the extra square at the end is still keeping it within 10 meters. I remember my question now, I think. Goodness, it's gone. I do. I need to write it down. It's so bad. I'm not normally this bad. My mind must be on other things. I do apologize. My question was, is the boat lift that's going on the north side of the dock piled? I've seen a number of boat lifts that are being placed now, and they are not just the lift, they are a piled lift, which obviously adds to further disturbance of the under the water on the lake bed. So I just wanted to know whether that was, maybe the applicant can help as to whether that boat lift on the north is going to be a piled boat lift or not. My preference would be for not, because I don't think that would be in the intent of the bylaw.
Anybody got an answer? Do you have an answer for that?
I thank you, Your Worship. I will leave that to the applicant, Brandy Evans, who is available this evening.
Oh, if we could hear from him then?
Hi, it's Nick Evans, actually. Brandy Evans' husband. Anyway, it is not a piled lift. It is a standalone lift.
Thank you very much, Mr. Evans.
Okay, we're good. Anybody else have any questions? Hearing none, I'll take a motion. Councillor Reid and Councillor McKenzie, those in favor? Opposed, motion carries. Done. Thank you, and thank you, planner. Thank you, applicant, agent. I didn't ask 3 times for public comment, but nobody seemed to be addressing it. Ask the bylaw. I missed the variance aspect of it, so I didn't ask 3 times, but let's open it again. And I'll ask 3 times if there's anybody who wishes to speak to this. Second time of asking, third time of asking. Hearing none, we'll take a motion. Same Councillor Reid, Councillor Scarrow, those in favor. Opposed, motion carried. Done. All right. Yeah. Councillor Ireland?
I vote.
You're voting. You're voting. Okay. That. Yeah. Next one up. Zoning amendment. Commonwealth Road and Barclay Road, and you're doing that.
Yes, I am, Mr. Mayor.
Good. Planning manager. Big
Good
time.
evening.
Good evening.
Just gonna get my, there we go. Hopefully now you can see my presentation.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you. As you mentioned, the application before you this evening is Z 2020-004. This is for O'Rourke Family Vineyard. It is located between Commonage and Barclay Roads in the Cars Landing neighborhood. The OCP designation of these lands is agriculture and rural residential, and the existing zoning is A1, RR1, and RR3 rural residential. And the proposed zoning this evening is a new direct control zone designed specifically for the development proposed for the site. At a later date, council will be asked to consider a development permit for each of commercial, greenhouse gas reduction and resource conservation, hillside, natural environment, and wildland fire. So this evening, as I said, we're going to confine our conversation to the land use. Subject property, just for your interest, is located about 5.3 kilometers north of Peak Cellars, which is another property and winery operated by the owners of the O'Rourke Holdings. The applicant is available, just for your record, if you have any questions following my presentation. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the properties outlined in yellow that are subject to this proposed new zoning. And those portions of the map that are shown crosshatched, it's like an orange color crosshatch. Those are the properties within the agricultural land reserve, both north and south of the subject properties. As you may recall, council previously rezoned these subject properties that are now going from A1 to the direct control zone. They were previously zoned various things, rural residential mainly, and they were moved to A1, and now we're evolving it to the next step. So there's a total of approximately 83.5 hectares of area, which is about 206 acres that are owned and operated as the O'Rourke Family Vineyard. So I'm going to refer to that loosely as the site, just for your reference. None of the properties, as I said, are within the Provincial Agricultural Land Reserve lands, although they have been planted extensively. The winery production facility and the owner's residence currently under construction at 15362 Barclay Road in Cars Landing are consistent with the uses permitted in the A1 zone. However, the intention is to develop additional facilities on site to promote the local food and wine industries that will not be consistent with the current zoning. The most immediate being the addition of a restaurant, kitchen, and farm retail components that go beyond the extent of the A1 zone designation. So, there are also some agriculture uses proposed on the RR3 rural residential properties located adjacent to Okanagan Lake. So the zone will address that as well. As I mentioned, we will consider a development permit in due course. So the official community plan tells us that direct control zones are very special and should only be used in unique and one-of-a-kind land use situations. And I believe that this certainly fits that description. O'Rourke Family Vineyard hopes to do a number of things. They hope to become a premium hospitality destination featuring agricultural production, winery facilities, diverse food and beverage services, indoor convention, education and entertainment event spaces, outdoor recreation and event spaces, and complementary residential and tourist accommodation to all of those things. Some of the things that have been noted as significant considerations are that there is currently no community water or sewer to the property, so there's on-site services that have been designed specifically for the proposed use. We recognize that there may be some transportation issues. Those have been discussed previously at the council table, and those will be considered more fully. Council might be in a position that they would like to ask for an economic impact assessment to be conducted at the applicant's expense. It's not something that has been submitted at this time. Similarly, you may want to consider asking for a transportation impact assessment or an update from that was previously done, I think about 5 years ago. So something else of note is that the tourism and economic development benefits in relation to a number of visitors, in addition to the scenic SIP and the new destination, it being a new destination in the community will of course be significant contributors. They will likely draw more economic benefit to area wineries and other tourism anchors in Lake Country. So I think one of the important things we identify first off is what are our desired outcomes. Obviously, we're hoping that we can meet council's mission statement. The official community plan vision and objectives are achieved. The neighborhood livability is respected. The diverse land uses are managed effectively in such a way that they don't unduly impact neighbors, and that the business is successful and contributes to the economic health of our community. So the direct control zone that we're proposing is broken into 4 sub areas. These sub-areas were identified by the consultant for the property owners, so the applicant, and it effectively divides the property into 3 separate areas by geography and roads. 3 properties are located between Okanagan Lake and Cars Landing Road. 12 properties located between Cars Landing and Commonage Roads on the west and Barclay Road on the east, and 2 properties east of Barclay Road. The waterfront properties allow winery access to the lake. The upland properties east of Cars Landing Road are largely in grape production. The winery production facility is located north of the vineyards and is accessed currently from Commonage Road. The water reservoir is located adjacent to Barclay Road, and ancillary uses are located east of Barclay Road. The proposed extension of the vineyard to the lakeside properties will create a visual connection running uphill from the lakeshore to the winery above. The O'Rourke Family Vineyard Winery and associated facilities incorporate the materials found on site into the design as primary elements. The building is cut into the hillside to partially bury the facility, minimizing the visual impact while celebrating the natural rock walls that have been exposed to the interior and exterior of the buildings. The surrounding vineyard has been planted in rows that align to 228 degrees for optimal growth. Each plant was located exactly with a GPS locator. The buildings have also been aligned to the vineyard to take advantage of the view through the vineyard. And you can see the photograph that I took on site there shows the alignment of the poles in the vineyard, and so creates quite an astonishing effect. Site plan shows the complex of buildings. Essentially, these are all basically joined together underground, and then surface is a single-story building above ground, and I'll walk you through that process. The DC zone proposes uses by area. As I mentioned, there are 4 areas as I described, areas A, B, C, and D. Area A is largely the winery and the vineyard. It's about 43, almost 44 acres, hectares in area. There are a total number of 11 partial lots. So some of the legal boundaries don't align with the boundaries drawn between areas A, B, C, and D, because we looked at the topography and the uses to create those defined areas. It may well be that in time, some boundary adjustment subdivision will need to be done to accommodate buildings, that kind of thing. But at this point, we're not envisioning a consolidation as being necessary. The table includes the approximate areas in square meters, hectares, and acres, trying to appeal to everyone's taste in measurement. It describes the existing development and the proposed uses for each area. So that was from the council report. Of course, the central area is about 10,000 square meters in area of land, and it's the most visible sign of development currently underway in the central portion of the site. So approximately 47,000 square meters, including the winery production facility and the existing residential uses, constitutes the disturbed portion of the site. Attachment C contains the architectural drawings for Area A. Attachment D focuses on the uses at the winery site by level, as shown in Attachment C. 4 levels in total, from the ground to the highest level at Gratitude Point. And effectively, there are 3 levels within the building set into the hillside. And as I said, 1 at the surface ground area. Now, I've included photographs that I took when I completed a site visit. And I've tried to associate them with the various aspects of the site plan and provide some arrows, basically to provide a bit of a visual walking tour of what is currently on site. Of course, the tables within your council report indicate those that are currently under building permit and indicate where future permits will be required for additional proposed uses. So some very interesting things on this slide. Of course, the top left-hand corner You see the cave entrance, very interesting. Lower down on that picture, you can see the barrels of wine stored within those caves. That picture that you saw looking down the lake, down the rows in the vineyards, was taken from approximately the owner's house. That area it contains 4 self-contained bedroom units there. So that was looking straight down the vineyard from there to give you some idea. But a few things have been happening. The winery is in production. So the wine production area is shown there in the upper right-hand side. The entrance from the exterior gives you an idea of how the building wraps around into the landscape. Center of the right-hand side, there is a picture of inside the building where the rock wall is actually exposed in the event center area. And that large cement wall that you see in the lower right-hand side, that's where the event center is envisioned to be constructed in the future. So this time, it's essentially a hole in the ground, but nevertheless, one thing that is taking shape is the amphitheater, that exterior event space. So I've provided you a view here looking north and looking south. Obviously going to be very picturesque and lovely to enjoy concerts overlooking the lake. The other thing that I wanted to draw your attention to on this level 2 plan is the crush pad area comes in, and you see the access to all of the central plant and all of the machinery that's driving the production facility. On the 3rd level, so this is 3rd level, we're moving up now. We're coming out at the surface. So you can see the winemaker's pavilion is the top left-hand side. It's that large sort of angular roof that's coming out of the side of the existing production facility. So that's a shell of a space that is envisioned in the future to become a tasting facility. Roof of the rear of the production facility, and which will become the joint to the event space in due course, is on the lower left side there. Another view of that winemaker's pavilion and the curve of the building is at the top of the picture. Again, you see at the top right-hand side, that's that same doors into that production facility, but you see how the building runs linear a level above there, and it actually surfaces at ground level at the very tip of the building. There is a grand entrance. It's difficult to see on the drawings. When I exported the drawings from PDF to JPEG, they became a little bit more faint. So I put a bit of a circle around it there so you can see that's essentially that covered entrance area at the front of the winery. So moving up yet one more level. Here we are. With some more, pardon me, we're not moving up a level yet, false start. I had so many pictures, I needed 2 slides to show everything on level 3. My mistake. Top right, or pardon me, top left-hand side, again, you can see the landscaping walls there that are shown on the site plan as that curve at the top of the drawing, just to give you an idea of what that looks like. You see the extended roof, which will eventually become part of the restaurant patio area as well. I left the picture of the entrance facility in there just as a cue. We're on the same level again. Obviously, I needed a cue. So that diagram on level 4 might be a little bit hard to decipher, but it's mainly showing you roofs and this very unique feature here called Gratitude Point. So it is essentially the top of a rock that remains, and you can see that it will provide an awesome view. Obviously, when it's done, it's intended basically as a viewing platform for visitors to the winery. The bottom right-hand side is a picture of the winery structure as it stands from the parking lot, just to give you an idea. So it is a very tall single story at the front of the building and quite a bit shorter, depending upon where you are at the perimeter of the building. So similar to other reports that I've brought you, I provided a zone comparison table comparing the A1 zone, which is what applies to the property now, and comparing it with the proposed direct control zone. So this was contained in attachment E, and it outlines, as I said, the existing and the proposed. Attachment F then continues to show you what the zone amendment bylaw itself looks like and what it would largely look like when it's attached to Schedule A of the zoning bylaw. Attachment G summarizes all the other applicable regulations contained in the zoning bylaw for ease of reference based on the amendments proposed at a previous meeting of council. So as you will recall, we reviewed those and we have chunked them out into pieces or portions that we will be considering moving forward. But because this zone was under construction, I have applied those new definitions, and obviously they will be amended depending upon the outcome of our further conversation at those future dates as we previously discussed. However, we can say safely that the purpose of this zone remains the same. At this time, there's no intention, as I mentioned, to consolidate the lots that make up the holdings. So one of the key things here is that we're viewing the site as a whole. So I think hopefully that'll become more evident as I go forward. But essentially, it includes all of the uses imagined at this point in time. It is just at this point in time. If things are added in the future, council would then have to reconsider the zoning through the standard amendment process, through the standard public process. But at this point, we're hoping that this will satisfy the needs of the development for the next 5 or so years, so that we can sort of get things organized and underway. So with a clear understanding that the plans for the site continue to evolve, these are the uses that are proposed in the immediate term. Of particular note is any notation of commercial development at the waterfront properties. The zone as proposed does not consider any commercial development at the waterfront location. That's area C shown on the map. Just want to be perfectly clear about that. When we set out on this process, that was a deliberate decision at the time the application was commenced, and so we have moved forward with that. Again, if that is reconsidered in the future, it will have to come back to council for further discussion and for continuation of that discussion with the community through the public hearing process. So currently we have the 4 areas as identified. So something that may be of interest is the scale of development. The O'Rourke family vineyard lands will be determined by the limits it has for water supply and septic percolation. However, in light of the range of options for servicing that can be developed over time, it might be that, the zoning can be changed at some future date to reflect those changes as they might occur. So the water supply and the sanitary percolation limits have been established. That supply and capacity will be drawn down by each additional use as the limit is reached or new capacity is added. And that will be monitored through the Interior Health Authority because they have a construction permit for the water supply system that is approved through the Drinking Water Act. And as well, of course, the septic capability will be similarly monitored through the appropriate mechanisms. As I previously mentioned, the Work Family Vineyard Holdings are in whole or in part impacted by several development permit area designations, including agriculture, just along the southern boundary where the ALR buffer requirements will apply, agritourism accommodation, depending upon how that takes shape on the property, commercial, greenhouse gas reduction, resource conservation, hillside, natural environment, and wildland fire. They're all different polygons, except for natural environment and wildland fire, which apply to the entire property. So we'll proceed through that development permit process, either through council's deliberations or through the technical development permits, once we've determined we've got the land use on its way to creating a bit of a better understanding, so that when we look at the plans, that we have something a little more concrete to work on. So as I mentioned, the key design elements are complementing the natural topography with the natural materials, etc. So we'll provide you more information about that when we move on to the design aspects. So I have a number of slides here, and I haven't prepared a lot. I think I will move through them very quickly, but I've got them here available for us to look at and discuss rather than stepping through them line by line. I've sort of chunked them into pieces to make it a little more manageable. So under permitted uses, there are a number of agricultural uses. Then we list the residential uses, accommodation uses, and then other types of uses. Now, each of these uses is applied to each of areas A, B, C, and D slightly differently, depending upon what the purpose of each area is, as we discussed previously. Did establish some basic subdivision regulations, essentially to reflect the minimum lot size based on OBWB provisions, where you have on-site servicing only, as well as the minimum lot area of pre-existing parcels. So if we were doing boundary adjustments, we have something to guide us. Development regulations, basically what we're trying to do here is look at, as I said, the whole site and talk about the density, the maximum number of units or gross floor area as applicable by the area, so that we didn't have to define very carefully exactly where each of the units might go at this point. It provides a little bit of flexibility. We don't have to be quibbling about a couple of meters this way, a couple of meters that way, resurveying, that kind of thing. So we're creating some loose parameters to guide the future development. Of course, the design aspects through the development permit would solidify that a little bit more. Again, another way to define this envelope of the development is by site coverage. So established a site coverage for the percentage of the entire site for each of the areas. You can see obviously buildings and structures within area C is very, very low. I believe that's the because that's where the vineyards are. So there's not a need for buildings in that area. So it's based on the uses that are proposed for each of those areas. Development regulations, height, nothing particularly significant here because we have just one single story, albeit a tall story above ground. We looked at it from that perspective, kept the 9.5 meters for dwellings and tourist accommodation, because that would be consistent with single family dwellings. Agricultural buildings, again, consistent with the agriculture zoning, and accessory uses with sort of the standard for accessory buildings as well. Setbacks. Now setbacks, I'm proposing that we talk about it just to the exterior boundaries of the site. So a lot of the referral comments that came back, for example, from the Agricultural Land Commission, Ministry of Agriculture, they talked about the relationship of buildings to agricultural lands, whether they're designated or actively being farmed. So that was their concern there. And similarly, the impact on neighboring property owners would be at the exterior boundaries of the site. So I've tried to define the setbacks for each of the types of uses from each of the frontages. So we have the dedicated road frontage, we have the north site boundary, the south site boundary, which is currently also being in vineyard, and then the east site boundary, which I believe is largely crown land at this time. So the regulations contained in the section 8, the landscaping and screening, are supplemented with the following. The minimum landscape buffer for the zone is level 1, except that it's a minimum 3-meter level 2 for all parking and loading areas and access driveways adjacent to the exterior boundaries of the site. That was something that wasn't accounted for in the existing regulations. So rather than reinvent the wheel, we simply supplemented it. Similarly, parking and loading, notwithstanding the regulations in 915 off-street parking, there are a number of things that felt were important to include, again, having a lot to do with the relationship of visitors and parking and exterior boundaries of the site. So otherwise, the same requirements would apply, as would apply elsewhere in the zoning bylaw. Agriculture uses in Area C, there's a specific section here because we recognize that Area C is smaller in area and is bound by residential properties. And so we wanted to create some mechanisms that would not unduly limit the agricultural ability to them to be planted in vineyard, but would protect neighboring property owners. So this is a suggestion that we have. There are other regulations. As I said, I provided an overview of those. Hopefully that assisted council rather than you having to go through the bylaw in detail. It was contained in the report itself. So I think that essentially concludes my presentation to this point, other than, of course, the presentation of the options. Option A is that the proposed bylaw creating the new DC 13 zone be received and given a single reading, providing the opportunity for further discussion and input prior to second reading, including feedback following engagement activities planned by the applicant and or receipt of additional information as may be identified by council. Option B is that the proposed bylaw be read a first and second time and be forwarded to public hearing if you love what you see. This option follows the standard process and the subjects of the proposal to formal public comment through that public hearing process as all applications go. And option C is that the proposed bylaws not be read nor given further consideration. Obviously, this is kind of impractical considering the development that is occurring on site and the relationship that has been forming between the district representatives and the applicant. We would, of course, have to combine the development then to the existing zoning. So the area of the restaurant would be confined. Some of these more interesting aspects of the development would be limited. Anyway, I think that concludes my comments. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer them for you.
I have Councillor Scott and Councillor Gamble.
Thanks, Corey. Take a breath. That was a long one.
Yeah.
So
Only long ones, you know that, right?
the query that I have is about the entire area of the direct control zone. I understand direct control zones and how they work, and I do believe that that's best suited for this particular development because of its uniqueness, as you identified. I wonder why the 3 lakeshore properties, what you're referring to as Area C, needs to be included into the direct control zone, because there's 3 residences on there. They plan to have 3 residences on there, and it's zoned for 3 residences on there. So I'm kind of wondering why those 3 properties are included, and maybe they shouldn't be.
Mr. Mayor, I can answer that. Certainly, because those properties are currently zoned rural residential, and rural residential does not allow commercial agriculture, they have been precluded from planting the vineyard there. They do want to include this in their operations, and they imagine it operating as part of the greater whole. And as such, it seemed appropriate to include it in the zone. There may be sometime in the future when the development evolves and it moves to something more. But certainly at this time, they would like very much to get vines in the ground and to have them associated with their winery development.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gamble.
This is how you're asking, Chair.
Well, having gone down to see the site, it appears that that it has been set up for the vineyard already. So that is a done deal as far as the vineyard. All of the infrastructure appears to be in place already. But I agree with Councillor Scarrow that I have concerns about that section C being part of this overall. My question is that there are, I have a number of questions, but one of the things that is concerning me is that there are other properties that are part of the O'Rourke properties, but they have not been identified in this presentation. I think that we are dealing with some of the facts, but not all of the facts. And I would like to know why they were chosen. It seems obvious that what they have chosen to include in this proposal is all of the properties that are not in the ALR, but they do own a number of properties that are in the ALR, and we don't have those identified. And I didn't really hear any discussion about, or at least very limited discussion on buffers, because the A1 may change in the future, I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, in a DC zone that is a general zone. So we lose the detail, I believe, and maybe I'm wrong on that, of the current zoning. Now, is that correct? So what is currently A1 will change and become just DC 13, I think it is. So we really don't have the same control at all on the actual land use.
Go ahead, answer that, Porter.
Oh, we can't hear you.
You're muted.
Sorry, you know me, a little bit of technical difficulty. Okay, so thank you. That's very interesting, and that's exactly why I chose to supplement the landscaping and screening section in the zoning bylaw. So I make reference to it. It continues to apply, and any subsequent changes to the zoning bylaw would then have to account for the TC zone. You're absolutely correct. We would have to be thoughtful about it, but certainly, you know, those are all things that we can consider. We could write something into the bylaw more specifically. We do have the representative for the owners, the applicant, Roger Green is the architect who is working on this process and acting as the applicant. Sure. He is available if you would like to hear from him. He can perhaps speak to your question regarding the number of properties.
I would very much be interested in hearing why there was this choice, and it appears that the lot lines are being transected as well. And I want to know what's going to happen to those remnants. Are they going to be consolidated with the ALR adjacent? What is the proposal? And also, I'd like to hear some comment on how they propose to buffer against some of the neighbors that to their property that are in the ALR. I believe they're right adjacent to the south end of the holdings that are included. But I realize there are other holdings that don't appear to be in this, and maybe that can be corrected if that is not the correct information, because you've said several times, and in the package it's clearly stated that there are no ALR properties in this application.
Okay.
So we can hear from Mr. Green.
Hello, can you hear me? This is Roger Green.
Yes.
Hi. So thank you for the opportunity to speak, councillors and your worship. There was a clear decision when we started into this process quite some time ago to limit the number of properties that we were looking at in the direct control zone. One of the reasons we did that was there was a concern about when we talked with planners about sort of A, the scope of where we were looking at, and B, what it would mean to get involved with a zone that was direct control that also had an agricultural land commission zone coverage on it. So there isn't an intent to sort of forget about the ALC land, and you are correct that the O'Rourke Vineyard does have a number of properties that are in ALC land. It's just simply that when we were looking at a direct control zone, it was determined that it would be a far smoother process to stop at the boundaries of the non-ALC lands and keep the ALC lands out of a direct control zone.
Okay, that's helpful. And further to that, you know, I think just looking at the proposal, it would seem sensible to me that the property below should not be in that direct control zone. It has issues that are quite specific to its own. I'm talking Area C. I did drive down into there and, you know, just, I mean, it's a great spot. It's definitely waterfront property and very nice, you know, but I guess the concern I have is, you know, as that becomes used, it's a very difficult access up onto Carr's Landing, very difficult, and it's going to have its own issues that maybe, you know, not maybe want to be part of the overall DC zone. So are you completely tied to that, or is there some opportunity for discussion on that?
You want to answer that?
I think there's always the opportunity for discussion on spaces. When we talked about sort of the use of the property and the long-term goals and the long-term visions of this client, they saw this as a unique opportunity to be able to sort of connect from sort of what they have going on up above to be able to reach right down to the water's edge. The reason we set up the property with the different areas as we have, and we defined area A, B, C, and D with the planners, with Corey and with Paul Dupuis prior to that, was because we recognize that there is quite a difference between what's happening on the waterfront at Area C from what we are trying to achieve up at the winery. And we believe that, you know, while we've brought it in under the overall direct control zone, by segmenting it out into a separate zone, we can have more specific controls and unique requirements to that would address the waterfront location and the unique scenarios that we would be dealing with down on that portion of the property.
Could you give some examples of what you might foresee that to be?
In what terms, sorry?
Like you're saying unique examples. I'm just wondering what you're thinking about. Like I'm trying to understand why that would be.
Maybe the planner can answer that. Can you get an answer to that? Am I muted?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's exactly why I included section 1912.7, agricultural uses in Area C. and put some very specific regulations in place for that. And as well, if you look at the lists of permitted uses by area, it is only a subset of the longer list of permitted uses that are allowed in Area C. So effectively, what we've done is created 4 different zones within one direct control zone by recognizing the different locations and the different things that are impacted in each of those locations.
And possible use.
Yeah, I have a number of other questions, but I.
Can you hear me? I'm muted.
I said that I know other
Yeah.
people would like a chance to ask, but can I continue? Okay, okay. All right, I have other questions. So, I guess one of the things, we're talking land use here, and Corey, I think you're the one to answer this. With changing to a DC zone, does that mean that denser development could occur under that proposed zoning in the future? And you're shaking your head, but why? Why could it not?
So
Because
that's
right now we have 45 accommodation units proposed on the property, and over 200 acres. But I believe those accommodation units are for a specific area, and we don't really know where they are, and I feel a little concerned about that. Normally, we know what's proposed. So I kind of feel like it's blue skying something, and I don't know if that's appropriate for us to say yes to a completely blue sky application.
Corey, can I speak to that one?
Sure, Roger, go ahead.
Okay, so what we've tried to achieve here with the zoning, and again working through with the planners, was the opportunity in the future for the client to be able to add to his property and to be able to bring in a future development with some accommodation on the site. What we don't know at this time is what that would be. I haven't designed anything. The owners had some vague notions, but nothing concrete that we could put to paper at this stage. So what we wanted to do when we created this direct control zone was we wanted to have the opportunity in there that there would be the potential to bring something forward in the future. By setting up the direct control zone with a certain number of units already required in there, we are able to bring forward a development permit proposal in the future for consideration. Naturally, when we bring home that development permit proposal, that would be when we'd be bringing the specific architecture and the specific proposal for consideration by council in the case of this project.
You know, and I think this is great from your point of view. But as a councillor, you know, we have responsibilities to the community. And, you know, when I look at the number of people that this could potentially bring into the community, I mean, from an economic perspective, from bringing revenue into the community, of course, it's exciting and it's great. But I'm also thinking about the cost to the community, and that's our job. Like, we need to think of these things. And I mean, just 45 units, 7 persons per unit is 315 people, plus the potential for 300 people at the event center. So all I'm getting at is there will be a huge impact on our roads in the community, on the infrastructure in our community. And that's why I'm bringing this forward, because I would like to have some idea of what we're dealing with and what, you know, I see that that our planner has put up a recommendation for or a suggestion for a cost benefit analysis, and that is important to me, and maybe informative to all of us, because it would give us then some information on the taxes generated, property taxes, the DCCs that would be involved, you know, possibly some park dedication, I know I've been asked about a public trail that could access a place called Glacier Glades. I don't know enough about it, but the walk group does. And just a traffic impact analysis that would, give us information on what the impact of this will be, because there will, the potential is for some very positive things. And I don't want you to get me wrong. I think it's a very exciting proposal, but I just, as a councillor, feel responsible to make sure we don't miss important aspects that our community expects us to see.
And I think those are some very good points there as well. I think, there is definitely some consideration, some further discussion that needs to take place. Some of the features that you mentioned, there has already been work on some of the traffic portions of this. And I know that there's been discussions between the O'Rourke group and planners and the city about potential roundabout at the bottom of Commonage Road where it joins in, and various other features. So I know there is a bunch of those pieces started. I'm not so sure about the numbers of 7 people per unit, but we won't get into that right now. Anyhow, I think it is important, and I think it is valid to look at sort of the concerns as you mentioned them, and to make sure that we're all on the same page. And I'm thinking that through this direct control process, that is what the opportunity of going through a zoning application specific to what we're trying to do here really brings to the forefront.
Thanks.
Did you have something to say, Corey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I might just provide a little bit of clarification, I think that in order to try to define where the uses can go, or what the density is, we started with some fairly low numbers in consideration of the overall site size. So if they wanted to put more density than is currently allowed within the zone, they would have to come back to council to have that conversation at some later date. But these were some basic ideas, and based on the segregation of the area into these 4 units and spreading the units there. For example, in area D, you could have 3 dwellings, whether that was for caretaker, full-time farm worker, or well, I guess those are really those are the kinds of dwellings that would be there. Oh, pardon me, temporary farm worker housing might also occur in area D, because that area is sort of the service area, and I think that's the area where we would have to identify the walking paths that you're speaking of, that sort of thing. But you'll notice that that area is not imagined for agritourism or accommodation of any kind. So while it seems to be not very specific, we have isolated many of the uses to very specific areas, and within those specific areas, the topography and whatnot plays a part in limiting what can happen. So I hope that helps explain it a little bit.
Thank you. I have a question and I'm not sure who may answer, but with regards to area D, and Councillor Gamble mentioned Glacial Glade, Glen. That was land alienated from the Crown some time ago. It was surveyed in such a way that it's totally landlocked. There are lots surveyed up there that people have bought, but there's no public access to them. And probably a 1905 subdivision. And so I'm wondering if this development could do a statutory right-of-way that would make public access somehow through area D to those. If you have a map that shows area D with a bit of that subdivision mapped in blue to the east of the area that is area D, east and north. And so I would like to see public access through Area D to those lands beyond. And however it was, I knew somebody that had a lot up there at one time and went back and forth with the provincial government to try to get access to it, but it was all private land from Barclay Road up to into those lots that were subdivided way earlier and with no public access. So I think it's imperative that this would be an opportunity to get some public access up behind there. I don't know in what form, or whether it's that right away for utility and vehicles, or just trail or whatever, but it should be, access should be gained in some way, if that's possible. I think it could be.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll make note of that. Certainly as the subdivision approving officer, it's something, access to lands beyond is something I have to consider at the time of subdivision. I'm not familiar with this area that you're speaking of, Glacier Glades, but certainly we can talk about it offline if you like, and perhaps I will become better educated in that regard.
In a map of that area, it was an early subdivision, and but it didn't extend any roads down to Barclay or any rights of way anywhere. So, yeah.
Okay.
So they're landlocked lands beyond.
Okay. Now, Mr. Mayor, while I have you, I understand that Matt Vader would like to speak to this.
Oh, certainly, if wherever he is, yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. You're correct. That is subdivided land with no legal access. It is a subdivision layout from, I believe it is 1905. There is a number of parcels up there, and I believe only 2 of them are held privately on the north end of the subdivided area. They each have a PID, but the rest of them are held by a provincial crown. So it is not all private up there, but for somehow 2 of them got sold at some point from the province to private landowners, but the rest is provincial and does run into the bigger land holdings up there, which are mostly provincial that surround this. So the access would have to be, or if we're talking about through Area D as you're referred, it would get to the crown land. It wouldn't go to private, but it would have to go through additional private lands off of the road right away on Barclay to get there.
Right. Okay, thank you. You understand it now?
Yes, thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Councillor Reid?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Corey, for your presentation. And Roger, thank you for being on the line. I'll probably switch between the two of you because I have a lot of questions. I agree with my fellow councillors that this direct control zone is the right way forward. I would echo their concerns over Area C. Maybe I can bounce between you guys. So if I look at it as a whole, the one thing I wanted to clarify, and Roger, if I may use your first name, I'm Cara. The reason I'm asking these questions is because in the report, it refers back to the original rezoning of these properties in 2015 and makes a number of statements around things like septic and water and traffic all being addressed because of the documentation in the 2015 to 2018 process. So just for everybody's benefit, in 2017, there was a public hearing, and as part of that public hearing, there was a report produced by the applicant, which was a transportation review. And I think it was Urban Systems who did it. And in that transportation review, which specifically looked at how traffic was going to be impacted in the Cars Landing and wider area, it made a number of clear assumptions and statements about the winery, which were then used by the community to consider things as part of the public hearing. So this is public record. So in that document, it was noted that the winery was going to be a small boutique winery with a production of around about 20,000 cases a year that put it into the same sort of scope as Arrowleaf Cellars. It also mentioned that it would be private appointments only, And the only people who would be using it would be generally the users of the restaurants who would then go and buy things at the wine shop. One of the reasons given by the applicant in the report was that they wanted to ascertain the level of demand for wider uses before moving ahead with that. And council recognized that that was a prudent step and said that if anything else was developed, it would be need a resort master plan to come back. Now, I feel this is kind of where we are at the moment, but without necessarily enough detail. So when they did that traffic study, they based it on a small restaurant, an arts and crafts store, they did not consider, and they specifically excluded the event center, the conference center, the tourist accommodation, and a large-scale winery, which resulted in peak summer hour traffic of being in the morning 28 trips a day. Peak summer, 28 trips, 15 visitors a day. In the morning, sorry, morning only. My question to yourself, Roger, is what is the vision for the winery? Because without that vision, without that clarity in terms of what is this going to be, is this going to stay a small boutique invitation-owned winery, or is it going to be something on the scale of Mission Hill with the volume of visitors that Mission Hill has? And without that vision, it's very difficult for council to consider the wider ramifications, as Councillor Gamble said, in terms of what is this going to mean to impact the community. So my question to you, if you could just sum up as much as possible, what are we dealing with here in terms of visitor traffic?
Certainly. So it's an interesting one, and maybe I should give a little history. I came onto this project in 2019, so a bit of what you're speaking to there predates my experience with working on the O'Rourke Winery and dealing with our client on this particular project. So I'm going to speak to what I understand the goals since I've been brought on board by the O'Rourkes to look at this project. My understanding, and it has changed day by day, I'll be totally honest on this project, is that they're looking at a long-term legacy building here. They want a facility that they can look at through generations with their family as a winery of a high caliber and high class in the Lake Country region. As you know, the O'Rourkes already have one winery in Lake Country. They've got Peak Cellars, which is over on Goldie Road. And this is sort of their second foray into the wine sort of world. And from what I was asked to look at when I came onto this project was a sort of a higher caliber building and a higher quality of building and higher quality of standards on both the wine and on what the facility would be at the end of the day. The number of trips that it would see, I think it is safe to say are going to be higher than what that traffic study would have been at the time. And, you know, as Corey mentioned in her study, it probably does justify another traffic impact study to review and to determine what exactly that means. That is not my specialty in this. What I do know is that we've been looking at multiple different pieces of this facility that would be able to operate and to be able to flex and change with times and with what the client would like to operate in here. So we do have, as Corey mentioned, under construction right now, we have the owner's house with the 4 individual suites in it. But we also have spaces such as the restaurant, which we're looking forward on, where we would like to be able to have sort of larger gatherings of people up to, you know, over the 125 square meters that the agricultural A1 zone would have allowed us. And that's part of what's driven us towards this direct control zone, is looking at having that greater flexibility. The client, the O'Rourkes, they do look at the potential of being able to host some larger events here from time to time, and that is why we have portions of this facility that we're looking at as future builds, such as the amphitheater, such as the event center, is so we can handle these different scopes and these different types of events. So it would be larger than what was the 2015 sort of concept at the time.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I think from my point of view, in terms of looking outside the winery site, I think we need some concrete numbers to work with. I appreciate how nice it is for the client, to be able to have something that they can flex. But we are at a decision point now where what we decide now is going to affect the impact on the community for the long term. So if you decide, the O'Rourke team decide that actually it's going to stay a small boutique winery day one, and we make our decisions based on that, and then a year later they decide that's not working, we have to open it up to a Mission Hill style, Summer Hill style business operation. The impacts of that are now firmly within the district to resolve, rather than it being a collaboration between the applicant, the developer, and the district in terms of improving things like road infrastructure. So I suppose that's where I'm asking for that kind of big picture, long-term view. Depending on your point of view, if you're a roads builder or whether you're a winery owner, worst case or best case scenario, because what's best for the winery in terms of maybe visitor traffic is not necessarily best for the infrastructure without us taking steps to plan it appropriately. And that needs to happen at this stage.
Yeah, I understood. And, I think when we talk long terms with a project like this, we probably are looking, like if I was to look 50 years down the road or 20 years down the road, I would definitely say it's headed more in the direction of a Mission Hill than a small boutique winery, based on sort of what I've been asked to look at so far.
So I think that's the planning we need to see in terms of the traffic studies. That's the end point.
Yeah, and I think that's where a traffic study would be an important way to help move this forward. So I know that Corey has talked about that, and I don't think it's something we're against as a concept either.
Okay, brilliant. So my next question is about Area B, which is the one that is mainly the tourist accommodation side of things, and butts up against the one remaining private piece of land in the area. I think obviously to the south there is a buffer there with private property where the O'Rourke vineyard finishes after this DC3 zoning, then goes into A1 ALC, and then sort of hits private property. But all the development is really focused at the north end, and this property is currently surrounded on two sides by the winery main entrance and the road, which is obviously going to turn north of their property, so they will get the traffic. And with this new proposal, they are now bounded, because it's a triangular piece of property, they are now bounded on the third side with the entrance to the residential area. And I was up there at the weekend, and there's obviously flagging tape and trees coming down in preparation for those lots. So you might be designing them sooner than you think. So my question would be, with the lack of buffers, and Corey, maybe I'm reading this wrong, but if you go to section G, when it defines a level 1 buffer, it says that there is no buffer effectively. So my problem with that is that those poor, they've got no landscaping buffer. They're surrounded on three sides. They're about to be inundated with winery visitors. And when from the district side, we're not providing them with a landscape buffer, but from the winery side, I wondered, with the new acquisition of the property, which was formerly Marilyn and Jack's, is there an opportunity? I'm just asking because I have to unturn every stone on this, but is there an opportunity to adjust the main winery entrance? So it still comes up on Commonage, and instead of going past the property on Berkeley Road, it comes in before the property on Berkeley Road at the existing driveway, and then continues to join up to the main entrance, so that it basically would still bound them on one side, but it would not be on all three sides. So they would be encircled by traffic. and it would also benefit the property to the north on the other side of the road, which is currently directly against the main winery entrance. So I'm so glad you're on the call today, as you're the architect, but is that an option to do?
So it's an interesting question, and I know I've walked those properties myself as well. My biggest concern would be that to get up to where the entrance of this building is headed, we would be going up much steeper sections of property, and we would have to do much more excavation and much more cut and reforming of land, which would ultimately affect more of the natural environment around there if we were to come in at the earlier point, because it's a far lower point where it comes off at Common Edge Road.
Well, I mean, it is just a little bit lower. It's just below them, and you're already coming in off there to get to the residential properties.
To that one residential property, yes, you are. But to the actual vineyard, the road rises from where it comes in, where it has the current access point from Common Edge Road. And I think that to drop it down, it is actually a substantial difference from the height of where it goes in currently to down there. I think it would have a much bigger impact, to be totally frank.
Well, I mean, it would be two less sides. So how, if that is not an option, how do you propose to mitigate the impact for this one property of being completely surrounded by winery access roads and not the full commercial access roads? So the access to the residential property, the tourist property, and the access to the main winery.
I would have to take that back and look at it. You know, we had talked about the potential of coming in off of the winery access to that area B as well, because the grades are actually lesser if we came from above than below. Yes. It's just that there was an existing roadway already there on the residential property.
I appreciate that. I mean, if it could be looked at from the point of view of sitting in their shoes and seeing what would work, what would be the best solution in terms of their peace of mind and comfort and ability to live in their property without noise and nuisance and dust.
You want
that would be great.
Corey, do you want to respond to that? Can you hear me, Corey?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the councillors, I would just draw your attention to section 1912.5. It says that minimum landscape buffer is level 1, except that it is a minimum 3 meter level 2 for all parking and loading areas and access driveways adjacent to the exterior boundary of the site. It would seem to me that those two lot lines in that triangular portion you were describing are exterior to the site. So I would interpret that as having to have a 3 meter wide landscape buffer there, whether that would be the natural vegetation as it exists now or some other landscape buffer as might be replace that native landscaping. But
okay,
that was the intention there.
Okay, I was just reading G7, where it says in each of the zones which border the O'Rourke holdings are subject to a level 1 landscape buffer. Therefore, where the DC13 zone abuts lot zoned either RA1, RR1 to the north, which is this one, there the proposed minimum landscape buffer is level 1. Essentially, this means that there are no specific width or design prescribed for any landscape buffer.
But in section 1912.5, I have changed that.
Okay.
So in the bylaw itself, it specifies something. So perhaps I did not update my report correctly.
Okay, just being consistent so we know which side we're jumping on. But if there is a buffer, that's fantastic. And maybe it just needs to be more than 3 meters, given the volume of traffic that's going to go past them. I think that should be something that was taken under consideration. With the cost benefit analysis, I saw in the presentation that was recommended to be done by the applicant. I would like to see that done by staff on the basis of the traffic impact study that comes in, because the staff are able to assess the impact on Cars Landing Road. I don't feel that the applicant, with all the best intentions in the world, would be able to do the same work that staff have done. And certainly we've seen that from, as far as I'm aware, with other proposals. And in fact, the first proposal, when this first came in, there was a plan for stormwater drainage, which was then presented to staff, and a report was written by staff back to council on their assessment of that report and how that would impact the district. So
we'll hear from the Director of Planning. Go ahead, James.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and thanks for letting me jump in. I appreciate the discussion, and having this discussion with council and in the regular council meeting is great. With respect to the any studies like traffic impact assessment or economic impact assessment, for example, those could certainly be completed at the cost of the applicant, but commissioned by staff. So effectively, the district is the client. We set the scope and the terms of reference, and it is funded by the developer.
that's even better than I had in my head.
Just wanted to clarify that for you, because that is very similar to what we've done in the past with respect to issues such as water modeling, for example, where we in fact commission the work as the client, and then that work is then funded by the developer at cost through the district. That ensures that we, the public, remain the client who is funding the project, and removes any potential for conflict there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Director.
Moving on to area C, I do support the comments that have been made by previous councillors regarding treating this as maybe a separate part of the proposal, or at least looking at it in more detail. On the chart, it says that it's allowed to have agritourism accommodation, but then later on in the report, it does not allow to have agritourism accommodation. So it says on, let me see. 1912.4. There you go, 1912.4. It has a nil by it, and then it's allowed it on your checklist for agritourism. So, and as Councillor Arnold. Yeah. So I think there's some tidying up needed to be done there before we go any further into a second reading. I strongly support the comments made by Mayor Baker and Councillor Gamble regarding the access to a trail across Area D, and I think one of our members of the community also raised it. It is documented in the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and also set out in the Future Trails map that's part of OCP. I think it's map 4. So there is more information on exactly where that goes and what that access is up into the Crown lands. I think it would be hugely valuable for the community to have that as a recreational access. We're seeing more use of spine top above the lakes. And I think anything that we can do to improve access across our community, particularly on that side of the community, I think is of huge benefit. And I know it's been a long-term aim for the district to get access, so that would be fantastic. I do have a couple of detailed questions. I don't have to go through them here, but I'm wondering if they can be addressed when the report comes back to council, if we go to a second reading, rather than reading them out individually. Just a couple of things around some of the, the land that was acquired for the Batterson lands for the new road. It says they were acquired by the district, but my understanding from the report, it says they were acquired by the district, but my understanding was they were acquired by the applicant to complete that intersection improvement that was part of the first. Oh, and Matt's got his hand up for that one.
Yeah, so
Our administrator.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. Both of those perceptions are actually correct. So it was acquired by the district as a road dedication paid for by the developer. It was just technically a road dedication that went straight to the district to solve the Section 42. So the wording's correct on both sort of sides of that interpretation of it. Is the developer acquired or paid for it, and it was dedicated and acquired by the district for public road.
Fantastic, thank you so much. And I suppose I just have a general query or concern about us putting in the DC zoning definitions that have not yet been through council. and using those to make a judgment on this proposal. I think there's a huge value, and I know you take a huge amount of time setting everything out in tables to make it easy for us to see. But I really would like to know where we are now compared with our current zoning, rather than the anticipated zoning, which we haven't really talked about in depth, and we still have some questions on height and grade. So it's a little too fuzzy at the moment for me to say, yes, this is what we're going to be doing, because we haven't discussed it yet. So I think, I mean, by all means, we can keep it in there, but I would like to see how it sets up against our current zoning prior to any changes that we haven't finished discussing yet.
Respond to that, Corey?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I can provide a little bit of explanation. I think when I first started to work on this zone, it was a large impetus to us looking at, like, we already knew we needed to review many parts of the zoning bylaw, and it became very evident that I would be building something with something that isn't working well currently. So it made sense to bring forward the text amendments and to continue to have that conversation in parallel with consideration of this zone, rather than building something based on something that is broken, that we are about to change and would throw everything into chaos again. So it was anticipating, chunking it down into bits and moving the process forward in a constructive way, rather than building with broken blocks, if you will.
Okay. I suppose my concern is things like the unintended consequences. So we've taken out the words hotel because the hotel didn't fit this particular application. But the reason it didn't fit the application was because it had servicing requirements and has been replaced with the term tourist accommodation, which is now the catch-all term for hotels, apart hotels and things like that. But we haven't defined the servicing strategy for tourist accommodation. So we're saying to one developer, you can have tourist accommodation because it doesn't have the same strategy, servicing strategy as hotel. Yet what happens if somebody else wants to come in and build a hotel and doesn't want to have the same servicing strategy, but should have it, but we've just made a zone description that has less specifications than we had previously?
Do you respond to that, Jane?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. I would have removed the definition of hotel no matter whose application was in front of us. That's one of the fundamental things, and I can show you precedents for how I got to where I am. But I think it's just general good practice. What we're talking about is taking the definition of hotel out of the zoning bylaw altogether. No one will have a hotel. And in fact, hopefully through this text amendment process, we'll clarify some things, because currently we have a lot of misalignment and a lot of confusion being created by this term apartment hotel. And so we have numerous examples of why we're making those changes. And we're proposing those changes with full knowledge that, yes, the servicing aspects and the new zones, as we redefine them with the new uses, will have to have those things looked at from that perspective, the servicing perspective. But please, there's in no way is the definition proposed of tourist accommodation a result of this application. It came first, the application came second.
Okay,
So,
that's good, because the report says that the servicing definition didn't work. Therefore, the tourist zone was created, or tourist accommodation. That's how it reads, but that's not how it happened.
It's the timing of it,
right?
And that's exactly why I brought those 7 bylaws forward to council. Rather than tackling a whole bunch of random things in the zoning bylaw, what I did is I looked at the ones that I felt we needed to look at first, because we had these needs. There are a couple of other development applications in stream that those definitions and the clarification of those definitions will also assist with. They're not my files, they're other planners' files. And so, you know, it's part of that bigger picture. When we have a lot of balls in the air, sometimes the juggling gets to be pretty fancy, but we're trying.
Okay, my last two asks are, can we consider the improvement of Commonage Road, Cars Landing Road along the frontage of the development, partly as a result of the traffic impact study. I know land has been cleared there, and I know that when we've discussed other developments, there has been frontage improvements. So a multimodal pathway along the front of that property would then connect with the proposed enhancements of the intersection and the traffic up to Commonage Road. So that is something I would like to see whether we can consider in this. And my final ask is that the vegetation along the berms fronting Commonage Road, Cars Landing Road, is addressed. I think, you know, the quality of this winery is, you know, you just have to step through the front door and you just see quality everywhere in terms of the construction and the size and the finishing and the ambitions of this. The berms that front the property haven't been reseeded and are now basically full of invasive species. And I know we do have in our bylaw a requirement or a ask from any disturbance of land by development that it is reseeded appropriately. I have seen this done up at Predator Ridge very, very, very successfully. They recently put in the commonage up there, and they reseeded the berms in wildflowers, and it looks spectacular. So I am wondering if we can ask very politely the developers team as to whether they would consider that, because I think it would be of a benefit to the community and a huge benefit to winery visitors if they saw something along the same lines as Predator Ridge when they came in. I think it is really spectacular in the summer. So I am not prepared to go any further than first reading at this moment. I do think we need further information. I think if we can get that information, particularly if we're able to get further information on the road intersection design. I know it's not part of this, but it kind of links all together. Have that for second reading. My intent is just to get as much information out about this project so that council can make an appropriate decision, staff can make an appropriate decision, and the community can feel that they have the right amount of information when we go to public hearing. But thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. I have Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, that's all a hard act to follow.
Thank you for everybody's indulgence.
So, yeah, I would agree with a lot of what's been said. I would totally agree with the comments about I've got some real concerns about how that's treated, and by all means, I want to see it get planted, but I want to see it get planted in a way. And in your report, again, as Councillor Reid pointed out, Area C is treated 3 different ways, 3 different times. So at one point, it's only for short-term accommodation, short-term rental. Then further along, it's treated as a tourist accommodation, and in 12-14-4 it says nil. So you know, I'd want to see some more specifics about that. And you know, short-term rental, it would defeat the bylaw if it's short-term rental, so that can't happen, because there has to be, the owner has to provide his taxation to prove that it's his principal residence to use short-term rental, so that can't happen. So I'd want to see how that all happens. We definitely need to have a traffic impact study that's up to date. We know that it's not a boutique winery anymore, and you know, I mean, I'm sure it's going to be a spectacular project. It certainly is quite well on its way to that. But we do need to treat that traffic and that community properly. And I would also agree with the asks about the trail, if that's a possibility. I mean, I don't know that area, so I don't know where it goes, but the fact that WALK has identified it, and you know, we have an opportunity to gain access to Crown land At any time, we should be asking. We should always be asking. You know, these things are incredibly important for the future and for the community we live in, but also for the future. You know, as we get denser and denser, we've got to have more and more natural places for people to be and things to do. So if that's an opportunity, we certainly want to do that. The traffic study, I think I mentioned, I think Councilor Reid summed it up pretty well. First reading, I'm perfectly happy to go there, but we've got lots of questions to get answered. And, you know, some of the things that concern me that are a little bit separate, you know, the water and the septic. It's got to be septic, it's not sewer. And I understand that water's monitored, but septic is not monitored. IH does not come and monitor people's septic systems. So if a private operator has brought in somebody to operate that, well, then it might get monitored by a private operator who's there. But there's no constant monitoring of that sort of thing. So I want to see what that plan is, because, you know, other properties have not been able to develop because there's no sewer. And, you know, like, it only takes money to make these things happen, but it's extremely expensive and it takes up land. There's got to be proper field. There's got to be a backup field as well. And, you know, we've got to know a whole lot more about the accommodation that's going to take place on that property before we start saying yes to all these things. Because there's limitations in the size of the property. Where are you going to put that field? Where are you going to put that backup field? Are you going to spend the money to shrink it? I mean, that's absolutely possible, but where are they going to go? They can't go in the ALR land. So where are they going to go? And what are we going to do? And how's it going to be monitored? And, you know, those things are really important to the people that live in that area. And, well, not just them, to our entire community. You know, when you're not on sewer and you're running a massive business like this, where you use one hell of a lot of water, and let's face it, it's not just the tourist accommodation, but it's a winery. So there's a hell of a lot of water being used. So where does all that effluent go? And how is it treated? I think it's really important that we understand a little bit more about that going forward.
Okay, thank you. Councilor McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Corey, for that presentation. I do have to agree with a lot of what I've heard as well. Councillor Ireland's comments on the actual sewage / septic system. The report says on-site services. I would really like to see some details on that as well, because that's kind of concern for me. And the other direct control zone that we've had issues with was on the stormwater drainage. So I know it's obviously a very muddy place when I went on my little tour, but I'd kind of like to see the stormwater drainage as well, be so that we don't flood out anybody down below there. So that would be a couple. And I do agree we do need a updated traffic study, because that will be a big issue. And anything that we can do along that road there to improve that, I agree. You know, we get these other developments to do that. We should get this one as well. So that would be nice to see. And the only other question is, with that property that we got for the roundabout, who is actually paying for that roundabout? Is that supposed to be us? I don't know if that's going to be them. So I just want to confirm, because I get it that they bought the land, but I just want to make sure that that is indeed the case. So, just check my notes quick here. I noticed that the ALC also recommended that the applicant, their exact words were that the applicant propose mitigation measures to help reduce the negative impacts, and they're talking of the traffic as well. So when the ALC is pointing that out, I think that's important that we follow that as well. And I do think there should be something set up, and in reading the report, it looked like there was a little bigger buffer between that house of concern and that has been mentioned in there. So I just would be, want to see something done a little better there to make that a little more tolerable for those people. And other than that, you know, I think this is going to be a great project when it's done. I look forward to seeing the end result. I just want to make sure we do this right. So I too am good with the first reading.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Kozul.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we've all covered it pretty well. Councillor Reid has done an excellent job at covering all of the small details and getting sure they're answered. Yes, my consideration as well was we tell a developer in Oyama that they can't develop because they can't have an on-site sewage system, and then we turn around and we tell these guys that, oh, you can have an on-site sewage system. So what precedent are we setting here, and how would a developer feel about that if you tell them no and then they hear that, oh, you allowed someone else to do it? So I think as a council, we would look bad that way, but I am the one that does support having on-site sewage system, even though some don't. And just so everyone's aware, there are some numbers. Councillor Blair was talking about that, and anything under 22 meters cubed falls under the Interior Health, and anything over 22 meters cubed falls under the Ministry of Environment. So I think that this site will be producing more than 4,800 gallons of sewage a day. So that means it will fall under the MOE, which will require that they have to do a lot more stringent requirements, which will mean that they won't be so far under the radar. And I do support that. I just don't like the fact that we're telling these guys, yeah, go ahead, put in your sewage system. And we're telling other people, no, you can't put in your sewage system. That's all I wanted to say. The other thing that kind of raised red flags with me is when it talks about the comments from other government agencies. BC Hydro had problems, TELUS had objections, IH said that they didn't receive all the information yet, and Fortis BC said there was issues. So I just see that there are a lot of strings that we still have to tie up. So that's why I have no support for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just remembered 3 more questions, really quick ones. The amphitheatre, I did not see any specifications, because who specifies an amphitheatre in their zoning bylaw? But I just wondered whether we were going to get any more detail on that in the further documentation as to what that entails, the height, the width, I don't know how you specify an amphitheatre, but just so that we are clear on what's being built and its size and capacity, and any health and safety sides of things with that. I would like to ask, and maybe Roger can answer this, if it would be possible for council to have a tour of the facility prior to second reading, for any people who want to take advantage of that. The reason being is when I was given a tour by Dennis O'Rourke very kindly in May last year, and some of the area that was designated now as the owner's residence was at that time a restaurant. So I'm just thinking that plans have changed, maybe walls have been moved, and I just wanted to get a visual on where we are, and just I think things have moved on, certainly from where I would have seen it a year ago. So if that's something that could be possible to arrange at a convenient time for the O'Rourke family team, that would be really appreciated. And leaning on the final question is, in the report, it mentions public engagement, public communication by the applicant's team. And I just wondered, is there any thoughts from the applicant's team as to what form and timings those would take?
So I can speak to both of those. I would love to give the whole council group a tour personally, because I think we have a great opportunity here, and seeing things and understanding them on site are sometimes way easier than trying to explain it on a screen, and to sort of get a sense of what we're dealing with. We've got topography, we've got buildings, we've got existing scenarios on the site. So yeah, I'm 100% for doing a tour with council, and I would be more than happy to host you on that tour with Dennis. On the second part about the public hearing or the public open house, we do plan to have a public open house on site as well. We are in the process of getting presentation boards put together for that purpose, as well as working with the client to figure out exactly how we would set up for a venue for that. And we would be working with the planners to figure out what exactly we need to do as far as a release on that to allow the neighbors to know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. So that definitely is also in the plans for this process.
That is fantastic news. And
You have to
can I,
work with Interior Health on that too.
yes, oh yes, with Interior Health on COVID protocols. And also, could I recommend reaching out perhaps to the Cars Landing Community Association, Doug Warburts and Julie Halfnight, so the co-chairs? They would be exceptionally keen to help out. They have a great community connection. They have a Facebook page, and there may be other community groups as well, like the Sailing Group, who can support you in getting that message out to the community as well, so that we can have a COVID safe meeting. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Scarrow? Oh, Matt, you there?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, this goes back to a couple questions, comments by Councillor Reid and Councillor Kozub. One, in terms of the invasive species, completely agree. I think there's some work that district needs to do as well, because we do have, lack of a better term, trees of heaven growing further south on Cars Landing Road. So we need to mitigate that. It's been a challenge budget-wise and the amount of invasive species. So I think that's a good benefit for us to work with the developer to understand sort of where that came from and the work they can do and the work we can do with the other public right-of-way. Otherwise, it's just going to spread back there again. And two questions comments about Councillor Kozub had. BC Hydro, because the road right-of-way was a trespass before, we'll call it section 42, the actual right-of-way was where the BC Hydro was installed. So that's like the old one. So it's actually on O'Rourke's property. So when it lists the PIDs there, it's that their infrastructure is on O'Rourke's property on the, I guess that's the southeast side of the right of way. So that's what BC Hydro was speaking of. They have provided power, three-phase power already to the site. So it's not a distribution. It's more just where the poles are and a stat right-of-way protection for that. And I think Corey maybe forgot the word no objections in that for Fortis, because Fortis is extending the main to service this and is upsizing the main into Cars Landing from the north to provide service, better service to the area as well. So it's not that Fortis has I think there's just the no objections is missing rather than objections, because they are extending their main. And in terms of TELUS, there is where on there is TELUS already in the area, and again it goes to the right of way that was just acquired and would have to be restrung, because TELUS and BC Hydro share poles and have that right of way, so they would just need to be protected where the current poles are, because it's not within the current right of way.
Right. Good.
That makes more sense from my side. Thanks, Matt.
Councillor Scarrow.
Well, you guys, after listening to everyone, and Corey wanted to speak first, if she would.
Just really quickly, I apologize for the lack of correction. I actually followed up with Fortis because the referral came back saying objection. I followed up and said, what's the objection? Roger and I dealt with them over that last fall, and obviously I missed updating it in my report. My apologies.
So, if I have the floor, Mr. Mayor? I suppose I do.
No, I'm sorry.
Do I have the floor?
Yes, you do.
Okay, thank you, sir. After listening to all of my fellow councillors, I think that I maybe perceive what we should be doing first here. So I would like to move option A, and I would like the information that we require to include three things: the traffic study, the economic assessment study, and I really like Councillor Reid's idea of a council tour, all to occur before the second reading. Do I have a seconder?
As well. I'll second it.
Are you second?
Okay, I will second it, and I'm going to ask if we could add a couple more things.
I'm open to that.
Okay, included in this first reading, the parkland, consideration of dedication of parkland trail through area D, which we've talked about. Exclude area C from the DC 13 zone at this point in time. Identification of ALR buffers as per the comments from the Ministry of Agriculture.
I forgot access to the,
Yes, well, I mean, we're putting it out there.
no, we need to include access to the Crown land.
Oh, no, that's what the trail is. The Parkland Trail through Area D.
Oh, my apologies.
Yes, that is the access to the Crown land, sorry. And also, ALR buffers you've got, multimodal frontage path
Very good idea.
and clear identification of workers and agritourism accommodation. So that we know what we're
Mover
doing.
accepts those.
I have Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd support all of those, but also, just in going back to talk about the septic or sewer system, Interior Health recommends that we get confirmation from an authorized person that there's adequate amount of land available. So I'd want to see that added as well to accommodate all allowable uses, i.e. hotel or tourist accommodations. For now eliminating hotels.
Mover accepts.
Does anybody tell hotels they don't exist anymore?
Yeah.
Maybe phone someone. As well as, the berms.
Oh, she did the berms.
The invasive species and they're going to reseeding that, because I've also driven by Predator Ridge and yeah, it does look
It's
fantastic.
beautiful, yeah.
And, I'm sure that this is going to be a better project and much more iconic. I mean, Predator Ridge is pretty good, but this is going to be fantastic, so.
Rena, could you read back that?
One more.
Let Kara finish adding.
Sorry, I think we're almost there. I just wanted to add the consideration by the development team of improvements that can be made on that property, on the access roads that surround the property, which is at 15575 Commonage Road, which is now surrounded on 3 sides, and what can be done to mitigate that. And the impact analysis, the economic analysis is really coming at it from an infrastructure costing side as well. So it's not just what the business can bring to the community, but what it will cost the community in terms of infrastructure.
Life cycle cost.
Yeah, life cycle cost, that's exactly it. And then the staff's assessment of that would be great.
I accept all of those amendments, but
Just one more. Because I'm not quite sure, Councillor Gamble's, I think she covered it, but I'm not sure if we got it 100%, because she talked about agritourism. I want to talk about all tourist accommodation. And what, even though there's might be some other plans in the future, let's try to project what those are.
All.
okay, Rena, what do you got?
Corey's got it all.
Okay, Corey might have to back me up here.
Yep, I got it.
Traffic, economic analysis, parkland dedication through Area D, which is the access to the Crown land, exclude C from the DC zone, identify ALR buffers, multimodal frontal path, clear identification of workers. I missed that one, Councillor Gamble. And
Workers and agritourism accommodation.
Accommodation.
Yeah.
Right, which is the one that Councillor Ireland just asked for clarification.
Well, to add.
All tourist accommodation. All tourist accommodation. Okay.
Those are two different things.
Okay. And then clarification of the land for septic use, invasive species on the berms, the tourist accommodation, the improvement to the access roads for the neighboring properties.
Well, the mitigation of the access roads for neighboring, reducing the impact of the access roads on the neighboring.
Reducing the impact on the neighboring properties. And then the life cycle costing.
Beautify the buffers.
Yeah, as part of the cost benefit analysis.
You got it.
ALR buffers, yep. And I would also recommend for council, so first reading, the recommendation in A is that the bylaw be read a first time and that second reading be deferred. I would just recommend that there's no need to defer a second reading, that all of these items as identified be brought forward prior to second reading.
Yeah.
Yeah, so first reading and then these items prior to second reading.
That would be my intent.
Okay.
Planner, Paul?
Tours,
Sure.
the most important one. Yeah.
All right, moved and second. Those in favor? We are. Opposed? None opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Silence gives consent.
Good job, Corey.
Thank you.
All right, next one up, Finch Road.
Good job.
Yeah, good job. Good stuff, all the way around. You heard that before?
Yeah. How about a burger? You remind me of too much.
Well, it's a pleasure this evening to see everyone's masks. Pretty good, how are you? We're going to start with Finch Road this evening as per the agenda. And maybe I'll get this a bit closer here. Hello. So interesting discussion earlier, big project. I'd like to thank Corey for all the hard work she's done because kind of took it off my plate. So it was interesting to hear all the great comments from council. This evening, what's that, sorry? No, not I. This evening, we're dealing with development application, proposal DP 2020-015C for 7650 Finch Road. The zoning for the property is RR3, Rural Residential 3. The OCP has a future land use designation of urban residential and the legal description as per the land title. And the subject this evening is the development permit for the demolition of an existing single-family dwelling and the construction of a new single-family dwelling, including a driveway access. The development permit areas are hillside, erosion, wildfire, natural environment, greenhouse gas, and resource conservation. The subject property, as you can see here, fronts the lake. It's 1.28 hectares, which is just under. This is just an aerial showing the property. You can't see it really well here, but there is a house in here. And a key topic of discussion, which we've been dealing with over a number of years, is the access, because there's been shared easement agreements between private property owners, but we've definitely brought this to some sort of conclusion as part of this application. We look forward to presenting that. This is Google Earth, just looking from the lakeside. Again, you can see the access kind of meandering amongst properties. So another historical access issue that we quite often deal with at the district. This is zoning and OCP, just really quickly, RR3 with urban residential future land use. So this is the site plan here. And as part of the application, we really wanted to clean up the access, the historical access issues. So this access is approved to the fire turnaround area. And as per our district engineering department, is fully assessed, including a geotech to make sure that these loaded retaining walls, which are under the bylaw general landscaping, because they're 1.2 meters to 1 horizontal to 1 vertical ratio. But we did get a geotech on those to make sure that they could support the access. This is the design drawings presented with materials and colors. Quite a modern looking building, as you can see. With the glass frontages, obviously the applicant is looking to take advantage of the views that the lake offers, as do many. The applicant has provided a landscape plan, so in all areas where there is disturbance due to the driveway access, which is meandering due to the topography, being a hillside area, they've minimized the appearance of retaining walls as noted at a 1.2, one horizontal to one vertical ratio, and it has been assessed by a geotech. When the driveway access does go in, we will require a geotech to be on site to make sure that they meet the requirements as set out in their geotech report. So a little bit of background, we've been dealing with the applicant on and off since 2017. They purchased the property. We've dealt with most of those issues. And so I'm not going to go into detail of those. They are in the chronology of the report. However, mainly to note is they came to us in 2020 looking to build this new home. And so the driveway access was very important. We were ready to bring this forward to council in January, and we were going to do a couple prior to issuance clauses as it relates to some IHA requirements. However, we needed to be absolutely sure that we weren't approving an access over and above some private easement agreements. So since that time, the lawyers have discharged the easements between the two property owners. We've received assurances from IHA around the septic capacity, and so we're bringing this forward to council. So the main concern over the years in relation to the property has been the access, as noted, and essentially they've discharged the private easements, which staff is very happy with, and from a legal perspective, there's no way for us to approve top of legally existing easements, which was very important, and for that reason, we brought the application forward to council. Option A is for council to approve the development permit and to receive the security in and around $44,000. Option B is for council to deny the permit, and option C is if council had any concerns with any of the particular guidelines, you could direct it back to staff and we could work with the applicant to get you clarity on those particular aspects. Thank you, Your Worship. That concludes my presentation.
Councilor Ireland, question or comment?
Yeah, a couple things. First off, one of your initial drawings showed there was two houses on the property?
One divided by.
Yes, so there is a house and then there's an old boathouse that is on the foreshore.
There's an actual house on the foreshore. I've been in the house.
So it's legal.
It's not a boathouse, it's actually the house.
It's a secondary dwelling.
That lived, it was the main house on the property for the people that owned this property before. So that's not being demolished. It's the little house that was up higher.
Absolutely. So what they've chosen to do, and it is in the chronology, and we didn't really want to get into this too much, but as legal non-conforming building, we would never allow that to occur as of today. But they did receive a building permit to improve it, but not to add to it in any way, as per legal non-conforming legislation.
Okay, so not loving that. Also, the retaining walls. Yeah, I respect that they follow the bylaw, but because they're stacked the way they are, they don't show any vegetation in those stacking areas. So really, it's performing the exact same function as one big, huge, tall wall. It's not, you know, that's what it's going to look like from a distance. That's what it's, if you can see it from the lake, that's what it's going to look like, is a big, tall wall. And it's going to be that heat sink again. That's because it's not screened and there's no vegetation planted. So I'm going to oppose this or send it back unless we can have some sort of plan for screening those walls. I know we can't do anything about the house on the foreshore. I'd like to see that gone.
Well, they're asking for a landscape. Big gap.
Yeah, but there's no plan to screen those walls. So,
yeah,
that I can see. There may be in my.
So I'm going to comment on the same issue. You know, I appreciate, you know, that we're concerned about the driveway, but it is a historical driveway. And if there are easements that allow it to be where it is, it looks to me like what we are proposing is creating a really steep and difficult terrain with those huge retaining walls. And how many trees are we removing when there's already an existing driveway? So I just want to know that, because, you know, I hate to see staff require something, you know, that is actually removing more trees, and creating not as attractive a landscape.
Your worship, if I may, a couple key points here is that under the bylaw, they would not have to come to us for this whatsoever, as it does meet the bylaw 100%. Another thing I would also like to mention is the existing access does not meet our driveway access bylaw. This is a huge safety improvement from the road to the building where we have a fire turnaround area so that they can get emergency services, so ambulance and fire. So our engineering department is very happy with this approach. I would also like to mention that a lot of the vegetation, as you can see here, has not been removed. These are larger trees. So there is some tree removal as it relates to some of this. And perhaps as a condition of the permit, council could absolutely ask that staff work with the applicant to revise the landscape plan to include vegetation in between the walls. That's something we could do as a prior to issuance clause, and we could deal with that this evening. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
This is a minor point, but it kind of caught my eye in the report where it says that under the new development procedures bylaw, there is no notification made about this development. And I had thought we had discussed that when we were reading final reading and made some final tweaks there. But I looked at the one that's published on the website and it says if there's a development permit with a council decision, there is no development notice sign and no neighbor consultation. So it's the only one apart from a DP technical that doesn't have a development notice sign in some form, which I think we might have missed something there, because to me, obviously it's up for discussion with the rest of council. This is just my personal opinion, but any development where there is coming before council should be notified to the community with a physical sign. I can maybe understand why there's no neighbor letter to a neighbor, because there is no opportunity to public comment in these particular situations. It doesn't have a variance. But I just wonder whether we need to consider that statement and whether we're happy with it, or whether they should have at least a public notice of a DP, so people are aware of what's happening in the community. But
thank you.
Councillor Howard.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's an excellent point, Councillor Reid. I think we may have missed something. In this property, I find it quite confusing that we've called it a boat shed. Because I have been in that house, because there was, the people that lived in that house had an issue with Lakestone. And, quite frankly, we allowed Lakestone to bully those people out of that house, but that's another story. But there's also an existing septic field that belongs to that house that is way too close to the water. So does that get to remain as well?
Through your worship, maybe I'll deal with a couple of these at one time. First, as it relates to the changes to the development application procedures bylaw, I believe that staff was looking at that in the way that, exactly as you noted, Councillor Reid, that people can't really make comment on development permits as it is based on the guidelines and the principles of council. So perhaps we would notify, hearing you loud and clear. And I believe the manager of planning is also online. So that's something we can definitely take back and have a discussion about. So we appreciate those comments. As it relates to the septic system, as well as the boathouse, or I'll refrain, secondary dwelling on the foreshore of the property. Essentially, it is legal non-conforming. As part of the building permit to upgrade that, our building inspector would have asked that IHA take a look at the septic system as part of the building permit process. So is it in a place where otherwise may not have been? By today's standards, probably. However, I do believe legal non-conforming status applies to the whole situation.
Yeah, well, I'd like to be confident that IHA, we may have asked them to look at it. I'd like to be confident that IHA did look at it. And I would like to, us to go back and work with them to screen those walls somehow. And either plant in between them or screen in front of them or do something. Because otherwise I would not approve it.
Okay. So, yeah, Councillor Scarrow.
Well, I'm kind of disagree with Councillor Ireland in that pool. I think, since number one, I definitely agree with our senior planner there, that the access as it exists or had existed in the past opens up a great liability for the district. Whereas now, with the access all on the same property and built to our standards as far as access goes, I do agree with Councillor Ireland on the screening of the walls with vegetation, but we were told by our senior planner that that can occur as a condition of approving this sort of development. The boathouse, secondary suite, I don't believe really it's part of this issue because they have rights and they have a constrained set of rights that they can do with that building, and nothing we can do will eliminate that building. So I don't see how this issue and that issue are connected. So I'm going, or I do have support for this with the condition that the screening gets done for that massive wall. I do appreciate the developer stepping those walls back because that gives us the opportunity for plantings in between those steps up, and that would screen it from any distant view that we may have from the lake. So I don't believe that we have the ability to deal with the cottage right now, and if we denied this, that would do nothing towards eliminating that cottage. The cottage is a problem, and we're probably never going to let anybody build anything else there. But as long as what's there is there, they can make it better without changing the size. So my support would be for approval.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not saying I'm voting to deny it. I'm saying unless we can do something with the screening of the walls, but I'd also want to make sure, and we owe it to the public, that if that septic field is incorrect and polluting the lake, that it's looked after, whether it's an existing property or not. If they're going to change that building, which they are going to do, so we have an opportunity, once they open up that door to change the building, that opens up the door to look at the septic field and make sure that it's okay. And that's all I'm asking for, is that it's checked to make sure that it's okay.
Yes, I have Councillor Reid and Councillor Gamble. Oh, yeah.
Your worship, what I would say is, the screening, absolutely, we can do that as a prior to issuance, and I've got a clause here perhaps council would like to, entertain. And in relation to your inquiry, absolutely, we can go back to our building inspector, pull the building permit, and apprise council of the situation with the septic.
Yes. Okay. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry if I missed this in the discussion, but there was a note from Interior Health around the septic to say that they were not overjoyed with the choice of soil for the septic field and that they were looking for more information about the size of the dwelling and plans for on-site drinking water, and they have not yet received those, according to the report. I would feel that they would need to include this accessory building in that consideration. Maybe we need to hear a big tick in the box from IH before we make a decision. I also was reading through the development permit guidelines. I do like their frank honesty when asked, has the building footprint been minimized in order to allow maximum green space? No effort was taken in this regard. I mean, and there's a lot of other things with concrete and lack of rainwater. So I think we do have an issue with the septic, and it would have been nice had they considered the impact on the environment and at least made some steps towards that.
Councillor Gamble and Councillor Ireland.
I think my issue's been dealt with, so
Okay.
I'm okay.
Councillor Ireland.
Yes, Councillor Reid, I read those things and I had a hard time actually reading them because of the callous disregard for the environment that these people are showing. And I have no respect for the fact that they step back the retaining walls to support this, because they only did it so they didn't have to get a variance. Irregardless, I think we should defer this until we actually hear from, until we tick off that IHA box. I'm not prepared to approve anything until that box is ticked.
If I may, just a couple comments. So the legal non-conforming issue is not directly related to the development permit, so we do have to keep those two items separate legally. The development permit is for the development permit areas as it relates to the new build. So that's why I didn't want to get into too much detail on that previously. That being said, option C is available to council. We can take a look at the landscaping with the applicant, and if council has any concerns around the environmental sustainability of the project, we can also work with the applicant to approve that. Those are absolutely why those options are there. So thank you, Your Worship.
Is there a motion that deals with that?
No, I don't want it to happen. Just because of the caliber.
Councillor Gamble?
I will second it with the addition of the buffering or the sort of planting of vegetation in the step back retaining wall, if that's acceptable.
So we're moving acceptance.
Yeah.
Contingent on buffering the step back retaining walls that constitute the driveway.
And
confirmation from IH.
as far as the confirmation from IH, I do not believe that we have the authority under this application to deal with that, but
Paul can
correct
speak
me
to
if
that.
I'm wrong. It's not part of this application.
So the IHA septic, as it relates to the legal non-conforming aspects, that's separate of the development permit. That we cannot deal with. As you related to the report, and perhaps I wasn't clear here, but I email received from IHA on March 10th of 2021, noting that the applicant had submitted information satisfying IHA that the site could be serviced with a septic system. And so they've given their approval to the development permit aspects. It hadn't been updated, that's correct.
So anyway, so moved acceptance with contingency on buffering the wall.
Moved and seconded. Any more discussion? Those in favor?
I am.
Opposed?
2, 3.
Councillor and Councillor Ireland opposed,
Andre,
and Councillor Reed opposed. Motion carried.
I'm the only one that notices you.
Okay, let's move on.
Let's get done, you guys.
Next one up, you're doing this one too, Paul?
Yes, Your Worship.
What are we doing? Davidson Road?
Davidson Road.
Good. Let's do Davidson Road.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the application this evening is an ALR application, ALR 2020-009. That's for 2411 Davidson Road. The zoning is A1, Agriculture 1. The official community plan has a future land use designation of agricultural. The legal description is as it is on the land title. And this evening, we're discussing non-adhering residential use to alter an existing additional residence by adding to the ground level of the building and a second story. The location, as you see here, is just off of Davidson Road, next to Okanagan Center Road East, or just off of the intersection there. There's one property, as you can see in here, in that intersection. The subject property is 3.180 hectares, which is just under 8 acres. This is an aerial showing the property. It is in high production. You can see here. So they do have their homestead, which is a regular use within the agricultural land reserve. But this house was an additional residence, and there's been some debate as to when it was constructed. The application says circa 1960. However, Councillor Gamble through AAC had noted that your family had built this, and so mid-1960s, 1965. You can see here that the house, it's very modest, it's very tiny, and it does have its own access as well as utilities and the like. So it really is what we would consider fairly good use of the land without encroaching onto more agricultural land. It has been there for 40 years. So this is the site plan here. You can see 2451 Davidson Road, small house, and then as noted, the homestead here. The plan's a bit busy, but it does the trick.
Which house are they rebuilding?
They're not rebuilding, they're renovating.
Which house?
This one here, this tiny one.
The bottom one?
Yeah.
And then maybe the design drawings will bring this to focus a little bit. So the addition on the ground floors, the building itself is not perfectly square, so they're looking to essentially fill in or add on to the building to square it off. So they're going to add 176 foot squared as the addition, and then on top of it, a second story. Here's just some site photos. You can see here from the road, that's the building there. As you get in, you can see it. It's not a very big house. It's pretty tiny. And then from here, you can see this right here marks the driveway. So this is taken facing west along Davidson Road. And then you can see here east along the fence line, facing east. And you can see all the agriculture in here.
Oh, I'm confused.
Yes.
There's two houses on this property. One is a little one that's to the west, and one is a larger one that's set in to the east. They're replacing the east house.
No, they're not. They're
Okay,
replacing, yeah.
the little west house.
Yeah, so this house here that's part of the main homestead, we'll call that,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
completely separate. We're not even dealing with that.
So it's the little tiny house.
It's just this little tiny, what I think back in the mid-60s would have maybe been for a family member or a picker's
It was
cabin.
built for my grandmother.
I know Penny, I used to see Penny in the driveway.
I did sprinklers down there. Yeah, that was, it's very small. I don't think it's 800 square feet or anything.
Yeah, and they're adding
I don't think it
168.
is.
And the second story.
And a
They
second
want a
story.
second story, and if you did go and see it, or if you go down Davidson, you'll see that the road, the topography kind of slopes down there.
Yeah.
And they've kind of built it, just where that slope comes, so.
I spent a lot of
It's,
time there when Stevie Fair was living there.
Been there for about 60 years, I think, pretty close.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, Paul.
Good background. We were actually just getting to background, so that's perfect. So a little bit, speaking about the past and the future. So just a quick overview of what has been being done on the property and what the owner has done to maintain the farm, essentially. So that farm produces 200,000 pounds of apples per year. 4 acres of the farm used to be planted with red delicious apples. However, in 2009, it was replanted with 4,500 ambrosia apple trees.
$100,000.
Yeah, in a high density configuration at a cost of $100,000.
So I read the report.
Just a reminder that they have actively been farming this since they purchased it in 2004. Other than that, this is the application that was on file. It was submitted not that long ago. We were pretty quick on this one. So in November of 2020, and we're bringing it to council now.
Councilor McKenzie, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for that presentation, Paul. Myself and Councillor Gamble were obviously at the AAC meeting when this was rolled out, and we got to meet the applicants and hear their story. And this is the type of...
You didn't give permission.
Oh, sorry.
This is the type of, of actual applicant. If we had more of these make for an easier decision for me, for sure. Because this one makes total sense. They're not going to take down any trees. They're not going to cost anything to the agriculture. So this one for me is as easy as it comes. So I just want to say I get full support on this one.
And I'll second that.
If I may, Your Worship, and I know a motion sounds like it's coming, I just want to let council know that there's 3 options in the report. We did provide a stronger option as supported by the AAC, and I would like to note that the ALC has just released some information on their website called Residential Flexibility in the Agricultural Land Reserve. So they've been consulting with farmers, ranchers, and those people affected by non-adhering residential use applications. And they have essentially amounted to say that by the end of this year, they've extended the mobile home to the end of 2021, December 31st. and they are looking to alleviate some of the rules around non-adhering residential use, which would be directly in line with an application such as this. So for council information.
So I'll move that then.
Has Councillor.
Option A, I'll move.
Councillor Ireland.
I'll move option C then, sorry.
Councillor Ireland, you have the floor.
I give up.
Option C.
It's just a great application. It's nice to see someone using an existing building and not tearing it down and throwing it in the dump, and not doing what our last applicant did and build it as big as possible with no concern for the environment. So I applaud these people, and I give them my wholehearted support.
Okay, I'll let you second it. Then I had Councillor Mackenzie long before you. Councillor Reid, did you want to speak?
I just think I would echo, brilliant application. Well done on everybody who took part in it and getting it through. If we had more like this, our job would be a lot easier. So kudos to the applicants. Well done.
Good, thank you. All right, those in favor?
We are.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
And loan authorization bylaw, you doing that, Paul?
Oh, no, this one's me.
Is that you? All
Yeah.
right.
Well, part of it. Oh, there's my camera. Hold that up there. That one right there. Just read. Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this is a report that is done in consultation and conjunction with many staff. So we have Trevor, our CFO, is on the line, as well as Tanya, of course. And Greg is available to address any of the questions regarding the project itself, which was discussed earlier tonight at the steering committee. So what we're proposing for council is this is the borrowing bylaw that Greg Buckles discussed earlier. So this bylaw is proposing to borrow for phase 4 of the wastewater treatment plant. And this is because the grant award is uncertain at this point, and so we must consider the long-term borrowing. So a loan authorization bylaw must be adopted with the approval of the electors. First, after the bylaw were to receive readings, it must go to the inspector of municipalities, and then we could proceed with some sort of approval of the electors. This borrowing is intended to be repaid using existing and future DCCs, so there'd be no increased user fees or taxes.
Yep. Councillor Scarr.
Thank you, Rena, for your presentation. We have two options, or three options actually outlined. What the first option talks about referring it back to a reverse. Well, I don't know what the AAP stands for. Alternative approval process. We've had two experiences, James, with alternative process, and on both occasions it failed. It cost us money, and then we went to a full-fledged referendum. And in one occasion, the fire hall, that was successful. Another one, Beasley Park, that was successful. My opinion is that this community is of a population that is small enough for social media to take over an issue and for the alternate approval process to be defeated. I don't like the alternate approval process, and I'll argue against it for a long time. I believe that option B is what we should choose.
You want to speak to that?
I'll just give council a couple more details on the difference between them. So alternative approval process, we have done 4 actually in the past. We had the El Dorado Reservoir, Canada Lands, wastewater treatment plant stage 3, and the rail trail. So wastewater treatment plant and rail trail passed, as well as Canada Lands and El Dorado Reservoir. All passed. We failed the rail trail, and that went to referendum.
Failed the rail trail initially and failed the fire hall.
The fire hall went to referendum, yes, and it went to 2 referendums, the fire hall. So council's options for an alternative approval process, the pros to that are the time consideration, right? And cost, exactly. So we only have to do 2 advertisements. It's a 30-day timeline. There's no hiring of staff required. Whereas if we go to referendum, we're looking at $10,000 to $15,000. We're looking at 60 to 80 days if I can crunch it in there, you know, at the max. Council does have the option to do both. You can do the alternative approval process, and then if that were to fail, you can go to a referendum. There's legislation speaking to that a referendum following an AAP must be within 80 days from the deadline of the AAP. So you could do the AAP within 30 days, and if that fails, you have 80 days to do your referendum, and then consider that. So I would like to note, though, in the presentation to council, there is an error in the bylaw that is attached in the amounts. So if you'll see the project amount, so this was sent over to Trevor to verify my numbers, and once he checked them, I didn't update the numbers in the bylaw. So if council is looking to consider readings of this bylaw, the numbers in the bylaw should be 8,840,000 versus the 8,750,000 that is indicated in the bylaw itself. And that is because of how, Trevor can speak to this if council has any questions, but how we borrow from MFA and how it increases. He can explain that to you. I'm not the finance person, but the number is incorrect in the bylaw, so we'd need to amend that if we're to give it any reading. So we're asking to borrow 8,840,000.
Okay, back to my original point, Rena, what does an alternative approval process cost us?
Staff time, couple of ads.
Okay.
Councilor Gamble?
I would support the AAP process to start with, for some of the reasons, you know, the cost and the fact that should it fail, we have 80 days to go to referendum. I do sympathize with what you're saying, you know, Bill, but I think that we got to also think of the ramifications of this. Either way, if it fails, we will go to referendum. If that fails, that is going to be interesting. But that's a sign that we have to have a look at what we're doing. So I'm not going to worry about it. I would make that motion if we're ready for that. It is nearly 10.
I just want to I'll be super quick. So I just want to make sure I understand that between 2020, when we submitted a report to council asking for the additional funding of 6.6 million, which is attached to this report, that has now changed and the project has increased by $2.2 million in the 12 months since then. So now we are looking for an additional $2 million on top of what we initially thought we were going to be asking for in 2020. Am I reading that right?
Yeah.
That would be, Mr. Buckles can address that.
And we are still pursuing grants through infrastructure grants, but we haven't heard any yet. But that could change the figure, that's all. The need is still there, but
Greg would like to speak,
Greg?
and he can address those questions from Councillor Reid.
Yeah, so I think with respect to the cost increases, I think everyone's well aware we are in a unprecedented time. I think with supply chain and cost escalations here. So the costing does reflect our current situation, and I will caution as well that may not, we may not have seen the end of that. It could get worse. We do have a healthy contingency here. We have a project management firm similar to, or construction manager similar to the methodology we're using on the fire hall to reduce our risk. But yeah, we are in a very explosive market right now. The other thing is, I think as council is very well aware, we do have this pending capacity issue, and the alternative approval process does give us an advantage in terms of timelines of being able to get in there and get it done, get the money in place, and get constructing. Time is not our friend when it comes to all of this, so we need to consider the risk around further delays in getting building. And final point is, with respect to Mr. Scarrow's concern, which Councillor Scarrow's concerns, which I think are valid, but we have undertaken significant community engagement. I think the community is well aware of what we're facing here and the importance of this. And so, I think where we've had issues in the past, and the railroad trail would be one of those where we didn't have the opportunity to get out there and engage with the community, so that they were fully aware of what we were undertaking. So because of these things together, we think the alternative approval process is the appropriate way forward, and I think it has every opportunity to be succceul.
So just before I give up the
Councillor
floor,
Reid? Yeah.
so can I just ask, we were discussing DCCs before we had this meeting, and is the DCCs at the new rate or the 8,000 rate, or are they going to be at the 5,000 rate when we're talking about this particular, paying off this particular tranche of the project?
So they will have to be at the increased rate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scarrow.
I wanted to let my fellow councillors know that I'm not prepared to die on this hill about referendum. If my peers feel that alternative process is correct for this situation, then I'm probably going to support it. But I just wanted to talk a little tiny bit about something that we bring up all the time, which is participation, public participation. When we have an alternative approval, those that don't like the idea or don't want to spend the money are actively involved. Everybody else isn't. So 10%, I believe it is, Rena, of our population, which would be 1,700 people or less, need to get together and oppose this to eliminate that opportunity. If we went straight to referendum, every resident of Lake Country has an opportunity for input, which has always been important to each one of us around this table.
So we haven't lost anything.
I'm just saying that public input, as Greg mentioned, has been plentiful, and maybe we're all comfortable with the amount of public input we've already had, but by having an AAP rather than a referendum, you are reducing that, period. But I will not oppose it.
Councillor Ireland?
Yeah, I couldn't disagree with Councillor Scarrow more.
Really?
Well, you're wrong about everything else, so why wouldn't you be wrong about this too? I don't understand. Look we lost an AAP because we went out there with an issue that we hadn't even tried to inform the public about. We have just spent a lot of money and a lot of time, and we're not finished yet, talking about the liquid wastewater management plan. I can't even talk anymore. So we're doing that engagement right now. We've gone, there's multiple efforts have been taken through the internet, through mailers, through advertising. So we put this issue in front of everybody, and it makes the most sense for our community to go with the AAP because we need to get it done. We don't have a lot of time to get it done, and people have been informed. So, there could be people that band together to fight against it. That's people's right to do that. And should we lose, then we'll have to go to referendum. But if people have been following this and looking at what's at stake, then I think they might appreciate the fact that we don't want to spend $15,000 on a referendum. And then we can put that $15,000, even though it's a drop in the bucket, we can still put it towards the liquid waste management plan.
And just as a comment, it's a public safety issue too. It's not a recreation or something frivolous. It's necessary. Councillor Reid and Councillor Koza.
I just wanted to say I'm really gratified to hear the approach that's been taken to the contract management. I think if we look at the fire hall, that's a really big success story in terms of managing the budget and bringing it in a really high quality project on time and on budget. So the fact that we're mirroring that approach in this, I think is very reassuring to see. Yeah, I just wanted to say that we should acknowledge the team's support and process in that way.
Good, thank you. Councillor Koza.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess seeing this is kind of my wheelhouse and everything, for as much as it hurts me, I think that I'd like to move option A. I think that's our only option. We're kind of painted ourselves into a corner here, and I sure wouldn't want to be a politician tomorrow in the District of Lake Country, so I'll be spending the next few weeks up at D Lake at the trailer, but and hiding off Facebook and growing a big beard and not cutting my hair anytime soon. But beyond all those things, I move option A.
Seconded, Councillor Gamble, second. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Opposed. Thank you.
Can I, thank you, Councillor Scott. Just to clarify that council's okay with that's as amended to the bylaw being the 8,840,000. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
All right, and BC Transit, another money issue. Councillor Scarrow. We got a seconder? Oh, Matthew wants to talk. All right, let's hear it, Matthew.
You got 5 minutes, Matthew. Move.
Okay, I will. I'll be quick. So good evening, Your Worship, Mayor and Council. As we've, I guess, already ascertained, it's that time of year when our operations agreement with BC Transit is up for renewal. I did include a cover letter with the council package, which gave an overview of those changes reflected in this year's AOA. The most significant change to this year's agreement is the billing format or the billing structure, and Transit will be billing based on actual costs and not holding reserve as previously done. So therefore, the local government partners will need to manage the pricing volatility within their own reserves going forward, as this shared operating reserve is being eliminated. So therefore, it's the district's intention to create our own transit reserve going forward as part of the revised reserve policy, which will be in front of the council for approval later this year. So you can see that we've included 2 options for council's consideration this evening, either to authorise or not authorise the new annual operating agreement with BC Transit. That concludes my presentation, Your Worship.
Good, thank you. Councillor Scarrow move. Councillor Ireland second. Those in favor?
What are we moving? We're moving
the agreement. Be authorized.
There's 2 different options.
Hey. All right, those in favor?
I am.
Opposed? Motion carried. Yeah. Lake Pine Local Service Area Amendment Bylaw.
Mr. Mayor, these bylaws are for adoption.
Oh, yeah. Councillor Ireland, Councillor Gamble, those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. And Development Cost Card. I have to.
This is also for adoption.
Bill's acting mayor, so you're acting mayor, and I'm gonna. Yeah.
Okay, acting mayor says. Do we have a motion? Moved by Councillor Ireland.
I'm making a motion first.
Moved by Councillor Ireland, second?
No, I'm not seconding it. I will.
Second for discussion. Thank you. What's your discussion?
I just want to say that I am opposed to the distribution, the way this is distributed, where we are charging multifamily residential, which are condos, townhouses, the same price as a single family residential that can have an accessory building beneath it, a secondary suite beneath it. And I can't support paying the same charge. So I'll be voting opposed.
Well, you're consistent.
Yes, I am. I will be voting opposed to this.
Okay, any other discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Gamble, noted. Thank you. Moving on, somebody tell me what's next on the agenda. I don't have one.
It's just for adoption. This is the amendment to the bylaw notice and MTI.
Looking for a motion? Councillor Allen, thank you. Councillor Kozub, thank you. Discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? None noted. Thank you.
I thought we were at a cattle auction.
Oh, give me $14, $15, $16. Hey, yes. Is there anything else on the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, the next item was an action item from the AAC, which was on the agenda tonight.
Yeah, we supported that.
Yep, so there's no action required for that or the information items, which brings us down to councillor items.
We will today start with Councillor Kozub. Councillor Kozub, your mic's on, use it. Councillor McKenzie, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to bring something up to council's attention is regarding the canal between Wood and Cal Lake. We have some locals there that are actively trying to get that dredged, and it's developing quite quickly, and they just got a email back from Tracy Gray saying that we would need to do something on our end in order for that to happen. Now, from what I understand, it would cost a few dollars and take up some staff resources, but I think it's probably something there that we should be looking at. So I would be prepared to do a notice of motion that we look at doing some kind of high-level report from staff. Don't get down in the weeds so much, or maybe we do a presentation as far as a little bit of a stretch session on it. I think that it's something that we should talk about because I'm quite sure we're going to get some letters coming in on this one. So maybe Tanya, if you would like to comment, which do you think would be better for us to not?
Yeah, I can give it. I had a message from one of the individuals that's involved with getting it. I didn't get a chance to get back to him today, but my understanding is they have federal and provincial the people that are organizing dredging, or they don't have. Administrator is saying differently. So we'll hear from it. I'll get back to Councillor Koza.
Yes, I just want to make a clarification. Todd and I were kind of working on this together for those that aren't on Facebook, and Andrew Spears is the one that's been spearheading this. Get it? Get it? It's too late. And he's posted on Facebook that he did get a letter from Tracy Gray, and she has said that, as I noted in my previous message, our office is unable to get involved until the District of Lake Country takes the necessary steps to create an application with Transport Canada. So we have to figure out how we do that. So it goes back in a circle again for the time being. So that's what Tracy Gray is now telling us. So I thought those that not on Facebook would want to know that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tanya, did you have any update to that?
Yeah, through your worship. So there's a couple of components to this. From the provincial level, there is no indication that they would be involved until such time that we decided the dredging would occur. And then they would be some involvement as far as the material that comes out of the dredging, because that is an environmental issue, that the material that would come from the dredging. So that's when the province would become involved. The indication from the federal side is that they would be there to support any kind of application that would go in and the processing of that application. But of course, there was no indication of funding for the process. So there's no, other than facilitating the report, there was no indication of anything else. There's a number of environmental assessments that would be required and environmental work as a result of this. So certainly, there is opportunity for council to consider this. There would be definitely budget and staff time implications. So I think, you know, just a high level, here's the steps we think it would take, perhaps a budget number that council would have to consider would be something. But I would suggest a notice of motion, as Councillor McKenzie has brought forward, would be appropriate so that staff could spend some time even just gathering that information, understanding that it's going to take away from some of the other things we're doing.
And there are implications of more boats and more speed near our intake for our irrigation system on that. So we should get some permission to post 5Ks or whatever it takes to keep it slow. I saw a video of people water skiing through the canal one time.
So I wonder if maybe if we're going to do something as far as online stuff or some information, that it might be a good time to put that report out again that we had done on the water quality on Cal Lake, and just do a little of that as well. Try and low cost to try and make a little information there, and then like you say, let's do a little high level report and just see what that's going to cost. Because I was talking to Jason Slepke from Ecoscape, and he figured that's at least $100,000 before we go. So it would be kind of nice to know a high level number. So I would appreciate if somebody would, you know, if I'm going to motion that, can I motion that tonight and get that seconded? Or do I do that on next meeting?
Council's procedures bylaw for notice of motion sets out that the proper procedure would be to introduce it tonight so that staff can prepare and bring that information forward at the next meeting. But it doesn't fetter council's ability to make a motion tonight and have it seconded and considered. So if council would like to have that moved and seconded, and we could recommend that staff be directed to conduct a high-level report outlining the cost of dredging the Oyama Canal.
Yes, I actually, because this has been an ongoing thing, and I've been trying to get us this way for quite a while. Actually cut this one short and just say I am going to motion that we do that tonight. If I can get a seconder and see if we can do that.
Councillor Kozub, second. And the motion is?
Raina, can you read that out one more time?
I can try.
Mhm.
That staff be directed to undertake a high-level report outlining the cost of dredging the Oyama Canal and report back to staff at the next earliest possible convenience. To council, sorry. Staff be required to report back to council as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, so thank you for that. And as well, I just want to let everybody, so that they're aware, even those that are listening. We had a little incident there on the rail trail, right between our last set of bollards going north and the first set of Vernon's bollards going south, or their last set. So right in the middle of the two, and the lady got hurt pretty good. So the ambulance drivers had to get out there, and they went to the Vernon end and couldn't get through the bollards. The two paramedics had to walk a kilometer in and then pack her out a kilometer. So in talking to Mr. Vader, everybody on our end all has that, so we're all good there, but I just figured we should be aware that that kind of thing is probably going to be stepped up, so we just want to make sure that you know, everybody is aware that we have access to those, and I just wanted to announce it publicly so that if somebody does get in that same situation, that we can address it a little sooner in case somebody is more injured than and needs to be immediately responded to. So just wanted to make that aware.
Okay, thank you. Well, how far do we get with
Blair,
Blair?
and then he's.
Okay.
Oh, is it my thing?
Yes, Councillor. Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna bring forward a notice of motion for the next meeting. I just, it's not a large thing, but I just would like us to, considering adding our voice to, several of the other communities, some of the larger communities in the province, about, writing to the federal government, supporting the decriminalization, not the legalization, but the decriminalization of these harder drugs. Because people are dying. And,
No, they're
Us.
talking about illicit drugs.
illicit drugs, not legalization, decriminalization.
Their class. What
It's still illegal to traffic, it's still illegal to sell, but we'll talk about it next week.
I know, you know, when I've read this lately, and what I don't understand, I should have this on, is if we talk about decriminalization of illicit drugs, are we also talking about mind-altering drugs that cause people to jump out windows and things like that? Because they might also stop somebody on the street and stab them. Are we talking, it happens, I know it's happened in Vancouver several times. So I'm just saying.
Okay, it's a
can we
debate for
be-
next week, but the fact of the matter is that we're not legalizing these drugs. We're not legalizing the sale of these drugs.
No, I
We
know
are
we're
not. The decriminalization is to stop that poor person from becoming a criminal because he took them.
Yeah.
That's the only point. And
if you
people
could-
are not, as we all know. So, but it's not to debate tonight. That's why it's a notice of motion for the next meeting.
Okay, and all I'm requesting is information on what drugs.
Notice of motion. You got it, Marina? Yeah. Okay. Councillor Scarrow.
I do not have a notice of motion, but I would like to let my fellow councillors know that that mayor's chair is really cool. You should try it sometime.
They get there. Councillor Reid, you're up.
Thank you very much. I'm going to keep it quick and simple. I was just walking this morning, speaking to one of the neighbours on Coral Beach. There's a couple of very overly friendly bears wandering around, particularly in the Coral Beach neighbourhood. They've been around there for a couple of days now. Conservation is aware. They haven't been hit with anything, but they are just in people's garbage and around bird feeders and things like that. So just a note to maybe keep your eyes peeled and pets safe and secure, and keep the bird feeders in for a little bit, because they're certainly making themselves at home in the neighborhood.
Very good. All right. Councillor Gamble.
Thank you. I just wanted to bring a little information that I read recently in the paper about vaccination in the interior. Rutland numbers of people who've been vaccinated for COVID-19 this past week were as much as 61%. Lake Country at 62%, all the way up to Okanagan Mission, which had the highest number of people vaccinated at 84%. So we are in with Rutland as being one of the areas of lowest vaccination rates in the central Okanagan. And I looked at the cases per 100,000, and the Kelowna area had the highest number of anywhere in BC, from what I could understand from the graphing material on the CDC. So all I'm saying is, please get out there and get your vaccination. It's that that's going to open the economy up. It's that that's going to get us back visiting our friends and our family. We want to do that, but we got to do it together. So
Right.
please do this.
Good, thank you. All right, and on that, we'll adjourn. Good night to all.
There's a direct connection to vaccination.